All right. Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. It's terrific to have everybody here with us. Let me go ahead and just get my screen set back up again. And let me check with the training team. Training team, you can see the slideshow now, is that correct? Yes, okay, great, thank you. All right, so we're really excited to have everyone here. We'll remind you a couple of times, especially in the first half hour or so, that if you can make sure you rename yourself, you would hover over your particular login, and there should be 3 dots that show up and you can rename yourself. We want to make sure you get credit for attending. If you have a group of folks with you, if you can use the Q&A to type their names in. If you are having trouble figuring out how to rename yourself, that's okay. Just use the Q&A and type your name in, and Teresa will be keeping roll that way. And so she'll know who you are and be able to make sure you get credit for attending the class. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start with the welcome comments and some introductory information. And I know a few people will probably be continuing to join us as we roll along. That's fine. The actual class content we'll get to in just a few minutes. So again, good morning. Welcome to our site supervisor training. Today, we have a team of folks to provide you with this training. We have Teresa Godinho. She's our sustainability representative, and Teresa oversees our recycled water urban reuse program. So she's the one that, if you're somebody managing a site in the city of Santa Rosa, she's the person that you probably most typically interact with from the city side. We also have Peter Martin. He's our Deputy Director of Water Resources. Peter will give us some welcome comments in just a few minutes. Also, our trainers include Claire Nordley. Claire is our Water Use Efficiency Supervisor, so she's going to talk about efficient use of recycled water, particularly in urban landscapes. And we also have Tony Llamas. He's our Water Quality Supervisor, and so he'll talk about the quality of our water and also about how we protect our city drinking water system. So Tony will be speaking to you a little later. In addition, we have Andrew Romero. Andrew is our reclamation superintendent, and he's going to talk a little bit about agricultural sites. We know that we have quite a few folks who are logged in today who are using recycled water at vineyards or growing pasture, that sort of thing. So this course doesn't provide much information about the efficient use of that water at ag sites. We don't try to train you how to do that, but we do have important information for you about the use of recycled water at any site, whatever reason you might be using it for irrigation. The training was developed by City of Santa Rosa to meet state and local requirements for using recycled water for landscape irrigation in particular. It does also apply to ag uses, as you'll see. The training is designed to provide site supervisors with a basic understanding of the recycled water system and help you understand how to use that water safely and efficiently. We'll also talk about recycled water system maintenance and the components of maintenance. That again will pretty much focus on landscape irrigation, but the concepts will be the same for ag. And we're hoping that by the end of today, you've leave us with a better understanding about recycled water and how to use it, how to comply with some of the state regulations. Again, most of you are probably here because you are ag users, but we know we also have landscape users, and you do need this to operate a recycled water system on your property that you're managing in the city of Santa Rosa. Our understanding is that the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board also accepts this training for folks in other areas as well, but you'll need to talk with them to confirm that. We have asked them about that over the years, and they've been very happy to accept our certification for folks who are using recycled water in other areas. So what I'd like to do before I go over the agenda is just ask Teresa to talk a little bit about logistics. So Teresa, can you tell us a little bit about the logistics for today's training?
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, so just so you know, the first thing, as we mentioned earlier, make sure that your screen name matches the name that you use for the registration. And if there's multiple people in the room, just send a chat, and then I'm going through and answering those chats via Q&A. And I'm also providing you with directions on how to change your name on the screen. So if you hover over your name, your profile name on the right hand side, there should be like 3 little dots. Click on those dots and select rename yourself, and then you can rename yourself. So again, I want to make sure that we are able to give all of you credit for being here. So changing your name is a great way for me to go through and check you off for attending. If you're going to need contact hours for any sort of certifications, go ahead and email me and let me know that you'll need contact hours, so that when I issue the certificate of completion, you do receive those contact hours. And then we also want to remind folks that we also do have a self-study option available for anyone who was not able to attend our virtual training. So if you know of anyone that's interested in taking the training and couldn't attend our live training, we do have a self-study option on our website, and you can visit our website to find out more information about that. Again, if you need to have feedback or have comments, raise your hand and we'll be able to see when you have a question so we can answer those. And if you're calling from a phone, you'll want to dial 9 to raise your hand. And if you hear your question being asked and answered, go ahead and lower your hand if you had a hand raised. So thank you for attending today. If you have any other questions, send them via the Q&A.
Thanks so much, Teresa. I'd like at this point to introduce Peter Martin, the Deputy Director for Water Resources at City of Santa Rosa's Water Department. He'd like to welcome you and say a few words. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks, Colin and Teresa, for getting this off the ground. Sorry for the logistical challenges, but I just wanted to say good morning to you all and welcome you to Santa Rosa's virtual site supervisor training workshop. We're obviously very excited to have you be able to participate virtually in this program and offer this training program. You're here today, obviously, because you've been designated as a site supervisor under a recycled water site use permit, or you're interested in learning about our recycled water system. But either way, we want to make sure you leave today with the skills you need to be successful when working and handling recycled water pursuant to the applicable regulations. And recycled water in generally is it's very highly reliable and a valuable source of supply that we must manage efficiently. And so by completing the training today, you'll walk away with the tools and the knowledge on how to best maintain and monitor your on-site recycled water system. So I just, again, thank you all for attending the training today and the ongoing use of recycled water at your sites. Using recycled water contributes to safe, reliable, and locally controlled water supply, which really is just a foundation of healthy communities in California. So with that, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much, Peter. Really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and look at our agenda for today. There we go. So we've done some introductions. What we'll cover our water supply overview, talk about where City of Santa Rosa obtains its water, how much water we use, talk a little bit about our recycled water and how we produce it, where it comes from, where it goes. We will talk about water quality and how you can help us protect our drinking water system water quality as well. Also, irrigation efficiency, and this will be focused on landscape irrigation. We trust that our farmers have a good idea about how to use that water efficiently out in their farm environment, so we don't try and cover that piece. We'll talk about irrigation system requirements, although again, this will be focused on landscapes. The concepts apply to our ag customers as well. We'll talk about cross-connection control and backflow protection, and again, this is focused on how to protect our drinking water system. We'll explain the site supervisor's requirements, what the city's required to do, what site supervisors are required to do, and then we'll do a wrap up in certification and talk about how you can make sure to get your certification, as well as what you might need to do to get contact hours if you need continuing ed hours and that sort of thing. The other thing I want to mention is we're going to be doing a quiz as we go along. And so what we'll do at each question, normally when we do this in person, you have an actual paper test that you take, and we do it open book, and we go over and make sure everybody gets 100% right. During this online version, what we do is we ask those questions throughout the presentation. So what we'll ask you to do when we come up to the quiz is to type an answer into the Q&A, and then we'll share with you what the correct answer is and make sure that everybody gets the right answer and understands, again, how to use this water efficiently and safely. So those are some of the basics for our agenda, and I'll go ahead and talk about our water supply and give you an overview. So City of Santa Rosa has 3 sources of drinking water. We purchase most of our water from Sonoma Water. So that is a wholesaler. Sonoma Water, as you'll see, gets their water from the Russian River system. Santa Rosa also produces some water from our groundwater wells. About 5 to 7% each year is groundwater, and anywhere from 93 to 95% each year is from Sonoma Water. And then we also have non-potable water. So this is our recycled water that's used at about 30 to 34 sites or so in Santa Rosa, have recycled water that they use for their landscapes. And then we have our very effective water use efficiency programs. Over the years, as you'll see, our water use, particularly for drinking water, has decreased significantly despite a significant increase in population. And that's due largely to our water use efficiency programs. So we'll hear more about how you can use the recycled water efficiently as well a little later in the program. So Santa Rosa, we used about 6.3 billion gallons in 2020. And the reason we're talking about 2020, it's just before the drought. So we're showing you our water use in what we might consider a normal water year. So about 6.3 billion gallons. Almost 7 out of 10 gallons was used by our residents. About 2.5 gallons out of every 10 was used by commercial customers, institutional and industrial customers, and the irrigation of their landscapes. And then less than 1 gallon out of 10 is considered non-revenue. And that's water that we use, but we're not selling it to anyone. So we flush our water mains, we test our fire hydrants, we put out fires, and we occasionally have leaks in our own system that need to be repaired. So those are non-revenue sources of water. And or uses of water, excuse me. And then our water sources, as I had mentioned before, Sonoma Water, most of that comes from the Russian River. We have city wells. We have 2 wells that we produce water from, and then we have recycled water. So as you can see, we make good use of our water, and it's largely the residential sector that drives our demand for water. So we pay close attention to population growth over the years to make sure that we're planning ahead. And here you can see each bar is the total amount of water that was used in our community in any given year, starting at 1990 all the way on the left and going to 2022 all the way on the right. And those dark bars are ones I'm going to call out. So when we look at 2020 all the way on the right there, that dark bar, and then you compare it to 1990. 1990 was a drought year, by the way, a pretty significant drought. And when we compare, you can see that we used less water in 2020. We actually had 57% more people, but we used 14% less water. Our highest water use year was 2004, and we used 20% less water in 2020 than we did in 2004. And again, population has grown, but the total water use has decreased over time in Santa Rosa. And again, this is largely thanks to our water use efficiency programs. We are also a city that adopts city and regional and state regulations early to increase our water use efficiency for new development and that sort of thing, so that our new development is much more efficient in terms of how it was built than how homes and businesses were built in the past for water use efficiency. And that helps as well to bring down our total water use. When we look out to the future, we have to think about how much water are we going to need in the future as we grow in population, as we have more businesses and more landscaping. And so when we look out to the future, you can see that the dotted lines show you what we project our water need is going to be out to the future. And those sort of light lavender bars that go across just around 31,000 acre feet, that's the amount of water supply we typically have in a normal year when we have average rainfall or even slightly below average rainfall. And that includes our potable drinking water from Sonoma water, our potable drinking water from our wells, as well as recycled water. When we add all that up, that's how much water we would have in any given year to provide to our customers. So you can see that because of such incredible increases in water use efficiency, even with continued population growth, we anticipate having plenty of water, except in severe droughts like we just had. In severe droughts, we have to be careful. We have to reduce our water use to make sure that water supply can last through the drought. Sonoma Water gets its water from the Russian River system, and we buy most of our water from them. So what you can see, and I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get my highlighter. Oh, sorry. Oops, I want actually the laser pointer. There we go. So the Eel River way up at the top here, that's in a different watershed. So that water is not naturally connected to the Russian River. But years ago, around 1900, 1904, a company built a big tunnel and water runs downhill about half a mile, and then it runs through a power generation plant that's now owned by PG&E. And that was used to generate electricity for many, many years. It's now not generating electricity, but that water that is diverted was then flowed downstream and was collected in Lake Mendocino. And that water serves a community around Lake Mendocino, agricultural uses, and cities that are downstream from there. So the Sonoma Water has a right, two water rights to divert water and store it in Lake Mendocino, and 2 water rights to divert and store water in Lake Sonoma. And you'll notice Lake Sonoma has headwaters up here on the west. It's not at all connected to the Eel River. So by the time it joins the Russian River, by the time Dry Creek joins Russian River, the water that had come over from the Eel has all been used up. It's been used up by whoever was all using that water along the way. And of course, there's additional water flowing through the river in addition to water that people pull out for agriculture and drinking. So Russian River system is in many ways managed by Sonoma Water to use those water rights. Again, they can divert water and store it in Lake Mendocino, and they can store it in Lake Sonoma for drinking water supply and for other uses. So they are caught between, in some ways, a rock and a hard spot, because they have to comply with a state decision 1610 that says they have to release a certain amount of water for fish and wildlife and endangered species. And then there's also a biological opinion they have to comply with that says they can't release too much. If they release too much, it can endanger some of those species as well. So they have to walk this very fine line as they're managing the drinking water supply. So Sonoma Water, each year about 95 to 99% of their water comes from the Russian River system, and then they do have groundwater wells also that they add water to their system. And they serve 8 primary contractors. These are contractors who many years ago, back in the 50s, agreed to help pay for the infrastructure to be able to distribute that water from where it's collected out of the Russian River and to various cities. So Cotati, Santa Rosa, Petaluma, Roanoke Park, Sonoma, and Windsor all helped to pay for that, as well as Valley of the Moon and North Marin Water District all chipped in. Other folks did not. So Marin Municipal did not chip into that system, although they can purchase water from Sonoma Water when there's excess water. So they are also a customer, but they're not a primary contractor. So when we look at this Russian River system, as we had mentioned before, water is stored in Lake Mendocino, it's released, but by the time it gets down to Dry Creek, there's really no more water left over from the Lake Mendocino Eel River diversion, so to speak. The water that we're using for drinking water is water that's released from Lake Sonoma. And of course, you can't tell the difference. You can't look at those water molecules and tell the difference, but when you do the math, you can see that that's what's happening. So they have these big collectors at Wooler and Maribel, where they look like giant wells that have arms that stick out, pipes that stick out underground. They're about 80 feet below ground, and they run parallel to the surface of the ground, but they're below the river, and they pull water out of the river. And then they pipe that water to all the different contractors and customers that they serve. So you can kind of get a sense of that map here. So because of that biological opinion, they have to make sure that there is a certain amount of water in the creek or in the river and not too much water in the river. So again, it's a balancing act. And it's also affected by whether or not we've had normal water supply or if we're dealing with a very dry year. Typically, almost every year, they do petition the state for permission to change how much water they're releasing so they don't release too much to endanger the fish. It may sound sort of funny that you would have too much water for fish, but again, it is a balancing act. They need a certain amount of water, but not too much. You don't want to scour out where they're going to be laying eggs and where those fingerling or very young fish are going to grow up. You have to be careful about that. So in addition, there is the estuary out at the coast, and it breaches normally in the winter when there's enough rainfall, and it closes up naturally in the summer. And again, that's part of that whole habitat system for endangered fish and species. Many of you are going to be aware that California had 2 severe droughts recently, the 2014 through 16 drought. It wasn't as severe here in our region, but we were mandated to conserve water by the state. The state mandated that we needed to cut back by 16%, and our customers cut back by 25%. So they were very, very effective in reducing their use. And in fact, folks kept those new habits. So after the drought and we got back to rainy weather again, we've not seen water use return to the amount of water people were using in 2013. It has continued to stay below that. So when we had the drought just recently, which is the second driest period on record for our region, the governor declared an emergency. Sonoma Water set allocations. They had to reduce how much they were taking from Lake Sonoma by 20%. So that meant Santa Rosa also adopted a 20% reduction as well. And we asked our customers to save water. They saved 1.8 billion gallons in 18 months. And we've since lifted that drought restriction. So as of March, that has been lifted. After the last drought, and again, with this drought, the state is adopting new regulations. So the state is working to make sure that everyone throughout the state becomes more and more water use efficient. So this is to show you just how severe this recent drought was. This is showing the average amount of water that is stored in Lake Sonoma. That's our major source of drinking water. That's the average amount per month. So the average October, December, etc. From 1992 to 2021. That was the average amount that was stored. This is the lowest month during that time period. Most of those lowest months occurred in the last 10 years. So certainly we're seeing the effects of drought and climate change. If water supply in Lake Sonoma goes below 100,000 acre feet and we're out of the rainy season, the state can mandate that Sonoma cuts back deliveries of water by 30% or more. If we had 30% less water supply, we would have to ration water. So this is really a danger point for us. So just to give you a sense of how much water was actually in the lake, you can see over the last 3 water years, we got very, very close. And in fact, it went below 100,000 acre feet, but fortunately we got the rains recently. So you can see that we're in much better shape now than we were. We've got a full lake. And so we're moving forward at this point without a drought declaration. Very, very happy to have that lake full. But that's how severe this drought was. It was below average storage for 3 years, and it was below the lowest month for 2 years. So quite a drought that we just experienced. During the drought, we did have a shortage of recycled water as well because our customers were being very efficient with their water use indoors. That meant that we ended up with less water going to our wastewater treatment plant. And so we ended up actually having a shortage. We currently have normal storage again. And in fact, we're releasing a little bit of our recycled water to the Russian River system it goes to the Laguna de Santa Rosa ultimately, and then goes to the Russian River because we're running out of storage. And that's a good problem to have where you have that much recycled water available. And this just gives you a sense of what our average amount is and where we are today. So what we want to do now is just pause and see if you have any questions about that material, and then we'll give you some quiz questions. So let me just see if we have any questions in our chat room. would you like to, if you could type a question in if you like, or you can raise your hand. And if you don't have questions, no problem. That's just fine. All right. I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and give you the quiz. So what we're going to ask everybody to do is, once we get the quiz question up and you see the answers, please type your answer into the Q&A box, and then we'll give you the correct answer, and we'll make sure, in case there's any questions or confusion, that you understand what the correct answer is. So let's go ahead to the first question. Oh, let me get off of the laser pointer. There we go. So Santa Rosa's water supply consists of which of the following? Water purchased from Sonoma Water, water from the city's groundwater wells, recycled water from our regional reuse system, or all of the above. So go ahead, type your answers in now, and we'll give you just a couple of moments here to get some answers typed in there. And if you're in a room, just come to a consensus if you can. If you have more than one answer, that's okay. Go ahead and type in if you have disagreement, because we're going to make sure you get the correct answer too. Just give it another moment or two. So it looks like we've got folks saying D, 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 all of the above. I'm not seeing any other answers. So we'll go ahead and then share with you. Yes, the correct answer is D, all of the above. So great, terrific. What is the source of about 95 to 99% of Sonoma water supply? Remember, Sonoma water is where we purchase most of our water. Is it desalinated ocean water? Is it groundwater? Is it surface water from the Russian River? Or is it recycled water? What's the major source from Sonoma Water, our water wholesaler that we purchase water from? All right, I'm starting to see answers. C, 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 seeing lots of C's. Okay, terrific. Yes, you are right. The answer is C. The vast majority of their water is from the Russian River system, and the vast majority of our water is because we purchase from them. All right, let's give you the next question. Which of these Santa Rosa water supplies is non-potable, is not drinking water? Remember, Santa Rosa has 3 sources of water. Which one is not considered drinking water quality? Water purchased from Sonoma Water, water from our wells, or recycled water from our regional reuse system? Go ahead and type your answers in. I'll just take a quick look at the Q&A. All right, so I'm seeing a couple of different answers. I'll just share with you what the correct answer is. It is the recycled water. Just so you know, our groundwater is drinking water quality, and we do put it through a simple above ground treatment system that makes sure that it meets all of the primary and secondary characteristics for drinking water. The water from the Russian River is extremely clean because it is pulled out from about 80 feet below the river, and it is filtered naturally by all the gravels and clays and silts and sands. So by the time Sonoma Water pulls that water out from about 80 feet below the Russian River, it's incredibly clean. They do have to treat it a little bit to adjust pH, and they add chlorine. But the only non-drinking water supply that Santa Rosa uses is that recycled water that's used for landscape irrigation and agricultural purposes. All right, so let's then move on to our regional reuse system. And we'll talk about that at this point. So we do treat wastewater from a lot of the cities within our region, but not all. We do treat all of Santa Rosa's wastewater, Cotati, Rona Park, and Sebastopol. There's the South Park Sanitation District. That's within the city of Santa Rosa. Was an unincorporated area for a while, and we've been collecting their wastewater as well. And then other unincorporated areas are also sending their wastewater to us. And most years, 100% of that water is reused beneficially. This year is one of those years where it's not 100% because we have more recycled water than we can currently store. So some of that water is being discharged. But most years, 100% of it is used. And it's used to recharge steam fields up at the geysers. So if you are familiar with Geyserville, up in the hills there are steam fields about 3,000 feet below ground, and they naturally release steam. That steam is captured by Calpine and other power producers. It generates electricity, and they use that to develop clean energy. So some of our recycled water goes there to recharge those steam fields about 3,000 feet below ground. A little bit is used for urban landscapes. Primarily, Roanoke Park uses quite a bit more for their urban landscapes. Santa Rosa has just a few sites for our urban landscapes. And then we have agricultural customers as well who are using that water. And again, in heavy storms and very, very wet years, sometimes we have to discharge recycled water. The water that's being discharged, though, is not sewage. It is fully treated water. It's the exact same quality of water that we would pump to our customers. So it's fully treated recycled water that we may need to discharge sometimes when the storage gets too high. This just tells you basically the same information. At our treatment plant, we have water coming in, we send water to the geysers, we store it, sometimes we have to discharge it. It does get used for agricultural purposes and for urban landscapes. So just to clarify, what is recycled water? Recycled water is wastewater that has been treated to meet all of the very strict standards that the state sets for reuse, for safe reuse of that water. And it's a sustainable resource because there is always sewage that is going to the treatment plant that needs to be reused, that can be recycled and reused. And it also helps us in terms of reducing demand for drinking quality water by using some recycled water for landscapes and irrigation. Just to clarify though, recycled water is not raw wastewater. So when we talk about recycled water being discharged to the Laguna, again, that's not raw wastewater. Recycled water is treated, goes under quite a few processes. It's also not gray water. Gray water is water that can be captured, for example, from a laundry system or from a shower, and then it's sent out to the garden to be used for irrigation. Gray water isn't treated. It might be, sometimes it's filtered to some degree, but it's not treated water. So we have wastewater that is highly treated and meets all of the standards that the state sets for safe use of recycled water, and that's not raw wastewater, it is not gray water. So just to differentiate. So how is recycled water made? So again, we get wastewater, we get sewage coming in, and the first step that happens at our treatment plant is gravity does its work and solid material settles out to the bottom, and that's scraped off. And it is used in our, we have a biosolids application program that can use those, and we also can send those out to be composted. So that solid matter is actually reused safely as well. Some solids remained in suspension. And so we have friendly bacteria that naturally occur, and those digest the rest of the solid material. And then the water is put through carbon filtration, and it removes any other things that might be in suspension. And then we use ultraviolet light, and that will ensure that any kinds of other materials that may have made it through are then killed, or for example, with viruses, it disrupts the DNA and they're no longer viable viruses. And then that water is distributed for reuse of the recycled system. So there are 4 steps that I've just described. Primary treatment is removing the solids. Secondary treatment is that biological digestion. Tertiary treatment is that physical filtration. And then disinfection is that application of ultraviolet light to make sure that that water is safe. The water does, however, have a few more nutrients and salts in it than drinking water. And that's why, although recycled water is incredibly safe to use in landscapes and parks, in car washes, for washing clothes, for cooling towers, a whole host of reasons, it's very, very safe, can't be used for drinking water because the content of nutrients and salts is a little bit too high for drinking water quality. So we continually monitor and test our water at the Laguna lab. That water or excuse me, that lab is closely monitored and audited by the EPA, and we meet all those requirements. So it's very strictly regulated also by the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the County Department of Public Health. So we test our recycled water regularly, and we test at various points, and we make sure that that water remains safe, so that as we distribute that water, as it enters our distribution system, it meets all of the requirements for the safe use of recycled water. We know recycled water is safe because there have been decades of studies. So the Pomona virus study confirmed that wastewater treatment plants do remove viruses. The Monterey Field Research Study showed that you can apply recycled water directly on crops that are used for eating raw. So strawberries or vegetables can be irrigated in recycled water and be completely safe for human consumption. There was a blue ribbon panel that looked at constituents of emerging concern, CEC, constituents of emerging concern, looking at should we be worried about pharmaceuticals and personal care products that might end up in irrigation water. And they are not of concern. They are not causing problems. It is safe to use irrigation, recycled water for irrigation. There are lots of other studies that have been done, and more studies are being conducted all the time. So we know recycled water is very, very safe to use. We know also that there's never been a documented illness from appropriate use of recycled water. So again, safe, clean, and it's also smart to use because it does reduce demand on our drinking water supply. Recycled water is used throughout the world. There are recycled water plants all over the globe. In California, it's been reused since the 1960s in over 360 locations. I think Santa Rosa has been using it since the early 1970s, been using recycled water. We use it in Santa Rosa, Roanoke Park, Petaluma, Windsor. Petaluma produces its own recycled water. Windsor produces its own recycled water. And this map that you're looking at on the right here shows where folks are looking at developing potable reuse of recycled water. That's where recycled water, which has gone through 4 processes. Remember, it's gone through primary treatment to remove solids, biological treatment to digest the rest of the solids in suspension. It's gone through carbon filtration, and it's also gone through UV. But to use it for drinking water, there has to be another advanced treatment process. It's often reversed osmosis that is used to make sure that any other remaining constituents in that water, any salts or nutrients, have been removed. And so you can see that the red areas is where there are water providers who have permitted potable reuse projects. The blue is where they're planning those. The black is where they're looking at the red and blue, by the way, are where they're going to add it to groundwater first before they pull it out and use it. And then the black and green are where they're planning to add it to reservoirs. And then Teresa, did you have your hand raised, or was that, no, it went back down. Okay. There are lots of approved uses. There wasn't room on the slide to put all of those uses. So just to point out, some of the more common uses, particularly in our area, agriculture, so orchards, row crops, vineyards, pastures, safe for landscape irrigation, including parks, playgrounds, golf courses. We can have landscape impoundments. So for example, at a place to play park in Santa Rosa, we have a very large pond there or lake there that stores recycled water, and it's used for that playground where kids are playing soccer and that sort of thing. It can be used for fire protection, toilet flushing. Sonoma State University, for example, uses it for toilet flushing. It can be used for cooling towers and air conditioning systems, commercial laundries, and car washes. So lots and lots of approved uses for our recycled water. In order for it to remain safe, there are lots of rules and regulations that are in place. So for example, the Division of Drinking Water requires that the plumbing be a separate system. New plumbing systems have to be purple. We'll talk more about that a little later. There have to be signs to identify where recycled water is being used. So for example, in our landscape sites, there are signs indicating that the recycled water is being used for irrigation, and any areas where we would be able to connect a hose bib to those areas that also are marked. Meters, I'm sorry, the valves are marked, et cetera. So that's all marked in purple and with purple signs to make sure folks are aware of that. The state has a general order, and it makes sure that Santa Rosa is overseeing the distribution and use of recycled water correctly. So Teresa goes out once a week and looks at all of our urban sites, make sure there's no runoff, no ponding of water, that sort of thing. The MPDS permits also have to be complied with. One of them applies to how we generate recycled water. It's looking over the reuse plant. The other one is our stormwater MPDES permit. That's let's see, that's national pollution. Oh, I'm going to forget. I'm so sorry. Maybe Peter can type it into the chat. He'll remember what MPDES stands for. My apologies. But there's one for stormwater, because the only thing allowed to go to the curb and gutter and to our stormwater inlets is rainwater, because all of our stormwater goes to our creeks. None of it goes to our treatment plant here at Santa Rosa. There's also a basin plan that the North Coast oversees, and there is the California Code of Regulations, Title 22 and Title 17, that oversee the requirements for drinking water and recycled water. So lots of rules and regulations we have to make sure we follow. And so we monitor our sites. And then Andrew and his team monitor sites for agricultural use. So within the city of Santa Rosa, we are the purveyor. We sell that water, we distribute that water, we oversee the users of that water. So we have a recycled water ordinance. We have a user's guide. We have water permits in place for our urban users and contracts for our agricultural users. And we make sure that all of the rules and regulations are being enforced. And we did want to mention, if you're at a site or you're with a company that would like to get a couple of copies of our recycled water users guide, you can make sure to email Teresa and let her know. And we can mail you up to 5 copies for larger organizations, 1 or 2 copies for smaller organizations. So just let us know. We do have some of these. You're also welcome to come by our office and pick them up. But if you would like recycled water users guys, please let us know. It doesn't tell you how to operate your particular system, but it tells you all of the rules and regulations that we have to apply and comply with. It talks about converting sites and what must be done to make sure that they're converted correctly. It talks about our plumbing requirements and that sort of thing. So, but if that's of interest to you, please let us know. We're happy to share that with you. We've got lots of copies. So at this point, let's pause and see if there are questions about the material that I've just covered in terms of how we generate our recycled water. Oh, and thank you, Peter, or Claire, actually. National Pollution Discharge Elimination System was the MPDES permit. Appreciate that assist. Thank you for that. So do we have questions about the information that's just been provided? And if we don't, that's fine. We can jump into the quiz. All right. And Teresa, you had a question. Let's see, who is that? Yeah, that's so Teresa, let's see. I think you can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
I think I'm unmuted. I just want to remind everyone to participate. We won't be able to change, or you won't be able to change your name anymore on their profile. So to participate in the quiz, go ahead and provide your answer and then enter your name after the quiz answer. That'll also help me confirm your attendance. So yeah, please participate in the quiz and just enter your name.
Okay, terrific. Thanks for that, Teresa. All right. What is recycled water? Is it gray water? Is it wastewater? Is it wastewater that is treated to a high level and then reused? Or is it all of the above? Go ahead and enter your answers into the Q&A section now. Thanks. All right, we'll just give it just a moment. Looks like there's a couple of more folks who are putting their answers up. Terrific. All right. Just give it another moment, make sure folks have a chance. So what we're seeing is we're seeing lots of folks, we're seeing the answer of C. I also see a couple of folks who put in D. So just to remind you, when we talk about recycled water, we're talking about water that has been treated to a high level and then is reused. So when we talk about it officially as recycled water, folks can reuse gray water, but that is not treated. Wastewater, you cannot reuse in that raw form. It's not safe to use, so wastewater is not recycled water. So the correct answer is C. If you got it wrong, no worries. We just want to make sure you do know the right answer. So thank you for participating in that quiz. Let's go for another quiz question. Oh, we have some hands raised. Let's just double check and see. I'm going to allow this first person to talk. So try to unmute yourself and see if you can speak. So you'd have to unmute yourself. So if you're one of those folks who raised your hand, you have to unmute yourself. All right, I'm going to try and.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, there we go. So I just had a question going back to the possibility of reusing wastewater for drinking water. That kind
Yes,
of concerned me, and maybe I shouldn't be concerned, but I was hoping that you could go into that a little bit more. And maybe
yeah.
also my secondary part of that question is, would everyone be notified, as a consumer if that were to happen?
Great. So if it were to happen, it would be first, it would be recycled water that goes through those 4 treatment processes I talked before. So it'd be very safe. Recycled water is very, very safe, but it has too many salts and nutrients for drinking water. So first it would go through those 4 processes where all of the solids are removed. It's filtered through carbon filters. They're huge carbon filters, very impressive to see. And then ultraviolet light. And then it would go through an advanced treatment process. Typically it's reverse osmosis with these kinds of lenses or membranes, huge membranes that are used to make sure that the only thing that passes through them is the water molecules, for example. So the water that would come through would be purified. So the water is actually very, very safe. It's been used for a long time, and other cities have been using recycled water, or excuse me, advanced treated purified water. The other piece of it would be that typically what you have to do as a purified water provider is you have to do another step, which is then introduce that water to groundwater first, and it has to sit for a certain period of time before you pull it back out and use it. Or you can add it to, say, a large lake, a large reservoir. And again, it has to have a certain amount of time where it sits. And that way there's a separation between your distribution system and your purified water. So if there were any problems, you have to treat it again before it's used. So there are lots of safety measures in place. If Santa Rosa were to develop a recycled water plant, it would make the news. It would be certainly people would know about it. We're investigating whether or not that would be cost effective. It's not something we'd be able to do for probably another 15 or 20 years because all of our water is currently contracted to go other places. But if we were to do that, plus building one of those plants takes a long time. It has a lot of environmental permitting and safety permitting and that sort of thing. So yes, we would certainly let our customers know, just as we do today, tell them where all of their drinking water comes from. But it is very, very safe water, and I really appreciate that question.
Thank you. I just had a follow. Sorry, may I
Sure,
ask a
go ahead.
follow-up?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Do you feel like, and maybe this isn't your sort of scope of knowledge, but do you feel like it would be more cost effective than, say, building more water storage to, save the water that we do get?
Another terrific question. And, you know, Teresa, it just occurs to me, we probably could have put a slide in about our new study that we're doing. That would have been good to do. We are studying those options right now. So though all options are on the table, we are studying those right now. And we're calling this project Our Water Future. So for anyone who's interested, you can go to Santa Rosa's webpage, which is and maybe Teresa, you can maybe type this into the chat, srcity.org/ourwaterfuture. And that has lots of information. It has video recordings of presentations we've made about this study that we're undertaking. It has slide decks that you can look at. So everyone's welcome to take a look at that. But yes, we're looking at all different manner of options for our water supply. What would make our water future the most cost-effective and resilient given climate change?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then I think we have another hand. Is there another hand still up? Let me just unmute. If there was somebody who had their hand up and is wanting to speak, try to unmute yourself and see if you can speak to us. Go
I
ahead.
think that was me. I put my hand up again. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
That
Okay.
was my follow-up question. So I apologize.
Okay, terrific. Well, that's great. All right. Any other questions? Well, I really appreciated those. Those were terrific questions. Thank you for that. And then tertiary treated and disinfected recycled water is approved for drinking. Is that true or false? Is Santa Rosa's tertiary treated disinfected recycled water permitted for drinking? Is it allowed? So go ahead in the chat and type in true or false. And if your name shows still up as Teresa, make sure you add your name so Teresa knows you've participated. All right. Let's go ahead and see what the answer is. The answer is false. Recycled water is tertiary treated and disinfected, but it's not been approved for drinking. It has some nutrients and salts in it that don't allow us to use it for drinking water. It would have to undergo advanced purification before it could be used. Let's go to the next quiz question. Oop. Gray water is untreated wastewater from showers, bathroom sinks, washing machines, and bathtubs that can be reused. Is that true or false? Is gray water untreated wastewater from showers, sinks, clothes washing machines, and bathtubs that can be reused? I'll just take a quick look into the, so I'm seeing lots and lots of folks say true. And you are correct. That's true. So gray water isn't treated, but it is not toilet wastewater. It's wastewater from sinks and clothes washing machines and bathtubs and that sort of thing. The regional water reuse system, that's Santa Rosa's regional water reuse system, treats wastewater through 4 processes. Is this true or false? Primary treatment to remove solids by gravity, secondary treatment to remove solids by biological activity, carbon filtration, and then UV disinfection. Is that the process that Santa Rosa uses to generate its recycled water? Is that true or false? I think this one's too easy. Folks are Jump them right in. All right, great. So this is, give just another moment. Looks like folks are still, oops. Yep, this is true. Those are the 4 processes that we use that generates recycled water that's safe for lots and lots of uses, but not for drinking water. It would have to go through advanced treatment for that, but it does go through these 4 processes. What are the benefits of using recycled water? A, save drinking water by providing an alternative source for non-drinking water uses like landscape irrigation. Reduce the need for fertilizer application on sites because recycled water has some nutrients in it. Reuse a natural resource that would otherwise be released to the Laguna de Santa Rosa, or all of the above. Let's see, I'm starting to see a few answers show up. Oh, sorry about that. So I'm seeing some differences. Some folks are saying A, some folks are saying D. So a little bit of disagreement about the answer. So here we go. Let's see what that answer actually is. It is all of the above. So it definitely reduces how much water is needed. Drinking water would be needed because we replace some irrigation water with non-drinking water uses. So using recycled water for landscape irrigation. It does have a little bit of nutrients in it, so it can reduce the need for fertilizers on recycled water sites for irrigation for landscapes and crops. And it does reuse a natural resource that if we weren't able to reuse it for other purposes like the geysers and landscape irrigation and agricultural uses, we would have to release it to the Laguna de Santa Rosa and it would ultimately go out to the ocean. So the answer is D, all of the above. We talked about the fact that recycled water is very safe to use in a whole bunch of different scenarios. So if you could type in a few answers about how can we, in what ways are we allowed to reuse recycled water? What are some of the allowed uses for recycled water? So you go ahead and type those into that Q&A section. Oh, great. I'm starting to see some answers pop up here. I can tell we have some Parks Department people here. Lots of folks saying parks, yep. Agriculture, yep. Irrigation of landscapes, yep. Landscapes, orchards, vineyards, golf courses, car washes, laundromats. Wow, somebody was really paying close attention. That's awesome. Agriculture, toilet flushing, great. You guys are doing terrific. So yes, as we had mentioned, there are 43 uses and we had listed just a few of them here to, and sort of in these large categories to give you a sense of all the different types of uses that it can be used for because it is in fact safe to use. City of Santa Rosa's Recycled Water Users Guide provides which of the following, and again, you are welcome to request copies if you wish. Does it talk about the city's rules, regulations, and guidance for design and installation and operation of recycled water facilities at your site? So for example, irrigation systems. Is it information necessary to meet all the rules and regulations? Is it both A and B? Is it neither A nor B? So none of the above, A and B, or A or B. Go ahead and take a look at the Q&A section. Go ahead and type your answers in. And I'm seeing some folks are saying, oops, Looks like some folks are saying D. Looks like we might have a couple of folks who think C. So it is actually that user's guide that we talked about does have both of those bits in it. It tells you all the city rules and regulations. It talks about what you would need to do to separate different the drinking water system from the recycled water system, how to operate, maintain that in relationship to the rules and regulations, and provides all the information that the city has to follow and use in terms of staying in compliance with the rules and regulations. So terrific. So at this point, I think, Teresa, if I'm not mistaken, do we have a short break planned for this point in the training?
Yeah, we have a quick 5-minute break.
Great. So why don't you all take 5 minutes and let's come back about 6 minutes after 9. So if you need to grab a glass of water, stand up and stretch, you want to use the restroom, whatever that may be. And then when we come back, we'll have Claire Nordley talk about, or Teresa, maybe you do the water quality and then Claire talks about irrigation efficiency. But anyway, we'll come back in 5 minutes and we'll talk more. Thank you, everyone. All right. I noticed that we had some questions in our Q&A that I hadn't picked up before, because with the answers to the quiz, it's sometimes a little hard to actually catch the questions that you're posting, but there's a couple of great questions. So I wanted to go ahead and cover those before I hand it over to you, Claire. So the first is, what is the cost difference between potable water and recycled water? And I don't know off the top of my head what the difference in the cost is, but it is more expensive to generate recycled water because it does have to go through that full treatment process. The water we purchase from Sonoma Water doesn't need to go through anything other than a little bit of pH adjustment and chlorine. We continue to add a little bit of chlorine to make sure it stays safe all the way to the point where it enters your tap and you use it at your home or business. So recycled water is more expensive, but I'm sorry, I don't have the exact cost difference at this point.
Colin, just to clarify, it is more expensive to produce, but our urban customers, Santa Rosa urban customers do get a slight discount. They get a discount on their fixed fee and their usage fee. And overall, it turns out to be like an 8% discount difference between potable and recycled.
That's true. As an incentive to encourage folks to use our recycled water in the urban setting at the beginning, many years ago when we started this in, I think, 2000, I want to say 2007 or 2009, as a pilot, we did give them a discount, and that has stayed true since then. And then another question, don't both gray water and wastewater have the potential to become recycled water after being treated to a high level? Absolutely, they definitely have the potential. We don't call them recycled water, so we differentiate by calling highly treated wastewater. Once it's been highly treated, we call it recycled water, but certainly any kind of wastewater that would flow to our treatment plant, any kind of wastewater that could be generated on a site has the potential to be highly treated and to become recycled water, can be converted to recycled water. So those were great questions. Let me just make sure. I don't think I missed any other questions. Okay, terrific. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put myself on mute. I'm going to hand it over to Claire Nordley. Claire is our water use efficiency expert in the city of Santa Rosa. She supervises our water use efficiency team. And so she's got a lot of expertise in this area. And then Claire, you'll just have to let me know when you'd like me to change slides, because I'll have it here up on my screen. So you just coach me along, and then I'm happy to advance slides. I'm going to go ahead and go on mute.
Sounds great. Thanks, Colin. I'll go to the next slide, please. Great, thanks. So I'm going to cover efficient irrigation basics. I assume many of you are landscape professionals, and this will be an a review for you. So hopefully you all get the quiz questions right. So I'm going to cover irrigation basics. Obviously the goal of irrigation is to apply the right amount of water at the right time, taking into consideration weather conditions, the plant water needs, the soil type, and then the irrigation system and how efficient that system is. So we're going to touch on each one of those points as we move forward. So I'll move to the next slide, please. Great. So what is irrigation efficiency? And you can hit the next button as well too, please, Colin. So irrigation efficiency is beneficial water applied divided by the total water applied. So what is beneficial water? It's basically water that actually helps the plant. It's water that remains in the plant root zone after irrigating. And if you hit the next, that means that conversely, non-beneficial water is watering where you have water that goes below the root zone. It's not helpful. It might not be running off, and you might not see that waste of water, but it is considered overwatering if the water is actually going below the root zone. Of course, non-beneficial water is also runoff, overspray, and misting. Next slide, please. So one of the basics that we use to talk about irrigation and determining how efficient a system is and how efficient your plants are at using water is a term called ET. So ET stands for evapotranspiration. It's measured in inches. And basically what ET is it's water loss from a plant. It's both the evaporation of water from the soil, as it's shown in this diagram, and it's the transpiration through leaves. So it's basically like plant sweating. So if you ever, have a plant and you stick it in a plastic bag, and then water forms on the inside of that plastic bag, that's because of transpiration. So both of those factors make up evapotranspiration, the evaporation and the transpiration. Obviously, this changes as weather changes. So plant water needs increase when it's hot, right? It decreases when it's cooler. So it is variable throughout the year, and we'll see a graph of that shortly. Now moving on to ETO, evapotranspiration O, is evapotranspiration minus effective rainfall. So obviously when it's raining and it's actually hitting the plant, it's actually getting down to that root zone, that's considered effective rainfall. And so if ETO is evapotranspiration minus that effective rainfall. So we'll be talking about this concept throughout for the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. So how do we measure ET and ETO? It's actually measured by CIMMYS. So CIMMYS is a weather station. CIMMYS itself stands for California Irrigation Management Information System. And basically, they're weather stations. They measure wind speed, solar input, soil temperature, wind direction, humidity and temperature. And we actually have two of these in Santa Rosa. So we have one on the east side of Santa Rosa, one on the west side of Santa Rosa. And so we're able to measure weather conditions and all of these variables frequently. You can actually access that information for free at any point if you'd like to. You just can log into the CIMMYS website. And so part of the advantage of having a couple of weather stations in Santa Rosa is we're able to produce very localized watering recommendations for sites here in Santa Rosa based on these inputs. So maybe I'll ask if Teresa or Colin wouldn't mind putting into the chat the watering website where we have our watering recommendations. It's srcity.org/watering recommendations. So you can go there. We update that every single week, providing recommendations about how many minutes you should be watering your turf, your shrubs, any different kind of plant material that you might have in your area, as well as with different irrigation tools like overhead spray or drip irrigation. So I encourage you to utilize that website. Obviously, right now it is wintertime and it is raining, so we do not encourage you to have your irrigation on at this point. Next slide, please. Great. So sort of going back to that ETO and rainfall, as I said, ETO changes over the years, over the months as weather changes. So if you hit the next button, Colin, please, and the next one as well. Great. So the blue line is rainfall. You can see obviously it peaks for Sonoma County in January and February every year. And then pretty much is zero during the summertime. So that, that's our climate, that's that Mediterranean climate. And of course, plant water need is the exact opposite. So our plants are the thirstiest right when it's not raining in our area. And our plants are getting plenty of rainfall in the wintertime and don't need supplemental irrigation. So this sort of off balance, of the plant water need to our rainfall really means that, of course, we need to be irrigating in the summertime. Next slide, please. So when we're thinking about ETO or evapotranspiration minus effective rainfall, I like to think about this in terms of different plant types. So we've got our high water using plants. Those are things like turf, some annuals, birch trees, willow trees. Those are going to be requiring at least 70 to 100% of the water lost from that plant. So they're going to use a lot of water. Like it says on the slide, 36 inches every year, or that's about 1 million gallons of water every year per acre. Moderate water plants like ornamentals, fruit trees, roses, perennials, those kind of moderate water using plants only need about 40 to 60% of that evapotranspiration rate minus effective rainfall. And then low water use plants, which are mostly California natives, drought tolerant plants, many Mediterranean plants, because they do have that similar, they've adapted to that similar, no rainfall in the summertime type style, those need significantly less water than moderate water using plants and high water using plants, about 10 to 30% of evapotranspiration. Next slide, please. So again, when we're thinking about the right amount of water, we want to be thinking about how much the plant needs, and obviously thinking about how much it changes over the months. So we consider our irrigation season to be sometime between April and October. Sometimes it's later, sometimes it's earlier. But it's sort of in that nice bell curve. We often have a lot of people sort of turn on their irrigation controller in April at one speed and then turn it off in October, and they haven't ever changed it throughout the months. So hopefully that's not you, but you can see here that clearly doesn't fit what the plant's needs are. So on this graph, we've got on the left-hand side inches, that's inches of water that the plant needs. And then on the bottom side, we've got the months, the irrigation months. So the blue bars are high water using plants and the amount of water that those plants need throughout the months. Moderate is in red, and then low is in orange. So you can see again, just the amount of water needed between high water using plants and low water using plants month over month is really significant. Next slide, please. So again, matching that irrigation sort of curve, creating irrigation schedules that follow that region's watering curve. So we've got, April so I guess I should say July is the highest water needing month. So when we were looking back at that graph of, ETO versus rainfall, July is sort of that peak month in which plants have not received water for a long time leading up to that month. And we have the highest temperatures. We have, the most wind that's pulling water out of those plants and out of the soil. And so that's our highest water need month. So basically you can create some sort of a budget that sort of says if July is 100%, then all of the months before July and after July need less than 100%. So April, for example, is 48% of July's water need. So again, on that website that I was mentioning, srcity.org/watering recommendations, we have both suggested minutes that you should be watering every single week, and we have percents. So I know that some irrigation controllers allow you to have that functionality of setting a percentage as opposed to number of minutes. And so that's where this percentage reduction would come in handy. Next slide, please. So another thing that's important to consider when you're setting up your irrigation system and you're thinking about irrigation efficiency is to think about soil types. Soil types really are important in figuring out how much you should be watering, both frequency and duration. So if you hit the next slide, please, and the next slide. Perfect. So you can see here, this is an illustration of one gallon per hour emitter. So that would be a drip irrigation emitter. And in sand, if you have sandy soil, you can see that the water, that blue circle represents water being applied, really goes deeply, but it's not wide. So if you're irrigating something that has a really deep root system, then that irrigation pattern is perfect. If you've got something that has a really short root system, like turf, for example, if you watered for a really long time with sandy soil, the water is going to be below the root zone and not being effective. That might not be the case for loam. You can see loam is kind of the ideal soil type, as you probably all know. And because it both is, the water pattern is both wide and deep, allowing for maximum efficient water applied. Clay is the exact opposite. It doesn't go deep, but it goes pretty wide. So it's the exact opposite of clay. And so knowing your soil type will really affect like I said, the duration and the frequency in which you're applying water to that site. So if you hit the next slide, please. So this is sort of the recap of what I was just saying. Sandy soils basically can't store much water and they dry out pretty frequently, or dry out quickly. Clay soil is the exact opposite of sandy soil. It stores water really well, but it doesn't drain quickly. And then silt loam is sort of the best soil that you can possibly get, and that holds the most plant available water and it drains well. So one way to improve your soil structure actually is to apply compost and apply mulch that will decompose over time, really creating a healthier soil over the long term. Next slide, please. So again, irrigating based on soil type is really important. Sandy soil has a high infiltration rate. That's that deepness of the water pattern as you saw it from that slide previously, but it has a low water holding capacity. So for sandy soil, if you have sandy soil, you want to irrigate frequently, multiple days per week, but you're just applying water in a short amount of time each time you're watering, because again, that water is going so deeply. If you have a short rooted plant, then it's not going to be effective. It's going below the root zone. And clay, again, is the opposite end of that spectrum. Low infiltration rate, high water holding capacity. You want to irrigate less frequently, and you want to apply more water per day using the repeat run times so that you're going to avoid runoff. So it's sort of slow and steady with clay soil. Next slide, please. So in addition to thinking about soil type and plant water need, of course, irrigation system is also really important to think about when you're considering what an efficient irrigation system is like. One of the ways in which we measure irrigation system performance is through the distribution uniformity, or DU. Basically, that just means how evenly is water being applied to that site. So here's a really good picture on this slide of poor distribution uniformity. As you can see, there's probably irrigation heads at each corner, and they're sort of spraying into the middle, but they're not overlapping. So they lack that head-to-head, sprinkler head to sprinkler head coverage, creating this brown spot that's sort of a triangle in the middle of this picture. So to achieve good distribution uniformity, you want to adjust the sprinklers for that head-to-head coverage so that there actually is that overlap, so you don't have these brown spots. Poor DU can also be caused by blocked sprinklers. You know, if there's plant material that's growing up in front of the sprinklers, as we commonly see with the use of sprinklers on non-turf applications. For example, you know, if you have a spray head that's blocked by a bush, by a shrub, that's clearly not a good use of an irrigation pop-up overhead spray. They should really only be used for turf. And then clogged sprinklers as well can cause poor distribution uniformity. Next slide, please. So what's the problem with poor DU? Well, sometimes when there's poor distribution uniformity and the grass or shrubs are not being watered effectively, people will apply more water so that those brown spots are eliminated. So if you hit the next button, please. So when water is applied more evenly, so like 75% of distribution uniformity, it's estimated that you're going to need to apply about 133% of the water needed by plants. So 100% distribution uniformity is virtually unheard of. It's, you know, maybe you could do that in a lab, for example, if you had like a perfectly square plot of grass and you had perfectly aligned sprinklers and there was no wind ever, you know, maybe you could get pretty close to 100% of distribution uniformity. Usually out in the field, when my staff does inspections of properties, we see, you know, maybe 50% DU. It's pretty poor out there, actually. And so we consider like not bad distribution uniformity to be 75% or plus. That's pretty darn good, actually. But even when you get to being able to apply water in an efficient way of about 75%, you still need to overwater to apply water as needed by those plants. And if you hit the next button, Thank you. So when water is applied very unevenly at a 40% distribution uniformity, it's estimated that you'll need to apply 250% of the water needed by the plants in the effort to manage those dry spots. So you can imagine people are often overcompensating with dry spots by just adding more water instead of addressing the underlying condition, which is that the sprinkler system is inefficient. We need better head-to-head coverage. You need to ensure that the spray heads are not blocked and not clogged. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here because I know you all see poor irrigation systems every day, just like we do. So I know it can be really frustrating and difficult to see these kinds of inefficiencies, and maybe customers don't always want to pay to fix them. So I understand that that challenge because we see it all the time too. One thing that I should mention with this is if you're curious about how to calculate distribution uniformity, we use a catch can method. So it's basically setting out calibrated cans on a lawn in a grid pattern, running the sprinkler systems for a certain number of minutes, and then reading that those catch cans. And then there's a formula that you use to figure out what the distribution uniformity is. It doesn't take super long, but it can be a really effective tool to show people, you know, this is your distribution uniformity at your specific lawn. And they can usually see like, oh, you know, all of those cans in that one area are full to the brim. And then the cans over in this area are only halfway full. And they get that visualization that, oh, this system is really inefficient. And so anyways, that can be one way you can sell to your customers, improving their irrigation efficiency. All right, next slide, please. So some of the efficient irrigation strategies that we've briefly touched on is applying the right amount of water at the right time, meaning, you know, based on the correct weather conditions, reducing runoff. Obviously, that's important and sort of a baseline, deepening the water penetration into the soil, irrigating based on weather conditions and what the plant actually needs, making sure that you understand the soil conditions on site, using repeat start times and multiple water days. You know, so if you've got, you want to apply 15 minutes of water to a lawn in Santa Rosa, I really suggest, you know, having a start time of 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and 6 a.m. and just run it for 5 minutes each time. So that way you're not causing that runoff and you're really allowing that water to soak in. And then making sure that the irrigation system is actually being monitored and maintained, you know, checking for broken sprinkler heads. People, you know, will kick a drip irrigation line out of the you know, out of the staples that are meant to hold it in, and it can be spraying, you know, things like that. So it's really just using your senses, your eyes and ears to find irrigation system issues. Next slide, please. So briefly going to touch on recycled water quality, something that Colin already sort of touched on, but these are sort of the nitty gritties of this. So the regional systems, the recycled water that will be provided to these sites do provide essential nutrients for plant growth, including nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So it's important to think about that when you're applying, if you are applying additional fertilizer to your sites, to not over apply fertilizer because you're already being provided fertilizer sort of in that recycled water that is being delivered to that site. So you might be able to save some money by not purchasing additional fertilizer because you're being supplied those nutrients through the recycled water system. So it's important to consider that. Next slide, please. So again, this is, you know, Colin touched on this, the recycled water quality meets or exceeds most drinking water standards, except for some nutrients and some salts. It meets the primary standards of health and safety for the nutrients listed below, and then the secondary standards of taste and odor for the following nutrients as well. So it is pretty high quality, but again, it is just something to keep in mind that when you're applying recycled water to plants in our area, that you don't need to add necessarily too much extra fertilizer because some of those nutrients are already being provided. Next slide, please. So some of the site maintenance for recycled water sites it's really the same as sites that use potable water. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're preventing runoff. You do want to flush the system every spring before you turn it on. Like I said, you want to reduce your fertilizer application. And then if you do have poor soil drainage, for example, clay soils, you want to consider your plant selection because of the potential for salt buildup from the recycled water. So making sure that you're choosing plants that can tolerate that kind of nutrient and salt load. Next slide, please. So again, regular site maintenance is crucial for all irrigation sites, including those on recycled water, making sure that you're updating the irrigation schedule to match the weather conditions. We hope that people do that, weekly or monthly at the very least. You obviously want to inspect your irrigation system before it's turned on in the springtime, and then hopefully weekly or monthly after that. You also want to ensure that you're repairing broken and leaking components, replacing any of the recycled water signs, tags, and labels as needed. And I believe Teresa can supply additional of those for the site. So if you need additional signs, tags, or labels, please let us know because we can provide those. And then making sure that you're monitoring and correcting issues such as runoff, overspray, or ponding for sites. Next slide, please. So at your annual system startup at the beginning of springtime, or when it's appropriate to irrigate, you definitely want to flush the system. That will help with the reduction of the odor that begins upon that startup. So you may notice an odor when you first start the irrigation system up. That's just a breakdown of nitrogen, but it's an aesthetic issue, and it's actually not going to doesn't affect the safety or the quality of the water. And you can resolve that by flushing. So, turn it on, let it run for a little while without causing overspray or runoff. But you can do that by flushing the system and allowing that water to sort of discharge. We do flush our distribution lines as well to maintain water quality. So if after the startup of your system and after you flushed it, you're still noticing that there is any issues with odor, please contact us and we can try to figure out if there's something else going on. Next slide, please. So basically, all the things that I just talked about in 10 minutes or so are covered in a much more comprehensive way with the QUEL program. So QUEL stands for Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper. It's 12 modules of efficient irrigation, soil management, pest management, all sorts of issues. Oh, here, the topics listed. Great. Water supply sources, soils, plants, water budgets, irrigation system. And they actually do require a catch can test. So you'll be actually doing one of those distribution uniformity tests as part of this class. So highly recommend it. It's really comprehensive. It is free as well to attend, and they have it in both English and in Spanish. So highly recommend that you attend. The website is listed on the slide. It's quell.net. And you can get your free water management certificate from taking this class. And then in addition to that benefit, you'd be listed on the website of quell.net. And that is where we as the city recommend our customers go to find a landscaper. We get asked all the time, who can actually make changes that you're recommending to our system. And we're not able to tell them individual contractors because we're a city, we need to stay impartial, but we can refer them to third parties. So we often say, yes, go to quell.net and you can find a landscaper, call around and see who best fits for your project. So that's an advantage of being Quell certified, is that you're sort of on that list and customers can find you. The other benefit of being Quell certified is that actually carries a dual certification for both Quell and for the EPA WaterSense label. So that's the Environmental Protection Agency WaterSense program. You would also be certified as an EPA WaterSense partner, I think is the exact title. So that's nice because you're also on their website as well. So people could find you that way for assistance. Highly recommend the classes. All right, next slide, please. So I'll pause here and maybe ask people to put things in the Q&A. I think would be easier for me to manage than live, if you don't mind. So I'll just wait a minute and see if anybody's got questions. And then we'll move on to the quiz after that. All right, so not seeing any. So I'll move on to the quiz. If you think of a question or if you just haven't written one yet, then you can certainly put it into the Q&A as we're going through the quiz. And I do see one popped up. So the question is, are recycled water options available for homeowners? Great question. The city of Santa Rosa currently does not have recycled water available for specific individual homeowners. It's supplied right now to some urban water suppliers that are, apartment complexes, for example, parks, that kind of thing. We don't have any plans to expand the system, but maybe that is something that I think we're considering in the next Our Water Future study that Colin is undertaking. You want to talk more about that, Colin?
I was just going to explain that one of the reasons is that we have to set up a separate distribution system, a purple pipe distribution system, and so it's very expensive to install it and to maintain it. So we just have one area of town, and all of those properties in that area have a connection for their landscape for recycled water. But to go out to individual sites beyond that would be super, super cost prohibitive. But we are looking at whether or not we could do a significant expansion of that in the study, as Claire noted.
Thanks, Colin. And I see a couple of more questions. So we've got, can a homeowner collect gray water to use for irrigation? Yes, so within the state of California, folks can use gray water. There's no permit required for a laundry to landscape system. So that means from your washing machine out to your, plants, there's no permit required. You can't store gray water without treating it. So that becomes much more complicated. I usually don't recommend that to folks. But there is a process for that if you needed to. And then, people can have gray water from bathroom sinks, from showers that also go out to their irrigation. That's allowed within the state of California and Santa Rosa, but a permit is required. So that can be a little bit more complicated. Some people might not want to do that. And then I see another question. In Healdsburg, they provide barrels of recycled water for homeowners. Could that be an option? We don't have enough supply, is my understanding, to be able to offer that. I think it's also, Colin, do you want to tap more into that?
I think you got it. Yeah,
Okay.
we just don't, it's fully allocated. So all of our existing customers use 100% of our water. So we just don't have it. And we also don't, the thing with Healdsburg was they had a 40% water shortage in the last drought. We did not. We had a 20% shortage. So having folks cut back a little bit really helped make a difference. But Healdsburg wasn't allowing any irrigation except with recycled water. So they set up a special program to help support their customers, but we did not have a drought that severe, and so we didn't have excess recycled water.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. All right, so next slide, please. We'll go into a quiz. If you think of more questions during that time, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and I'll look at them. All right, so first question, recycled water contains more nutrients and salts than potable drinking water. Is that true or false? You can type your question into the Q&A. Okay, yep, I'm seeing a lot of trues. True, 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 true. Everybody here is very good. It's true. Yep, next you can hit the perfect. Great, everybody got that right. All right, you can hit the next button so that the answers can appear. Perfect, thank you. So what is ET? We talked about ET during this presentation. Is it A, evapotranspiration? Is it B, evaporation from soil and transpiration from plants? Or is it C, a friendly little alien movie star from the 1980s? Or is it D, or D, all of the above? All right, I'm seeing a mixture sort of all over the place, some A's, B, C. Okay, next you can hit the button. So it's D, it's all of the above. I did think this one was a little tricky because I was not thinking, oh yeah, it's a movie star from the 1980s. That was a joke. It's the, little alien guy. But anyways, so yes, it is D, all of the above. ET is evapotranspiration, which means that it is evaporation from soil and the transpiration from plants. All right, so now I'm going to pass it off to Tony, or maybe Colin. I don't know if you're going to introduce Tony.
Actually, I think, Claire, you have a few more slides about runoff.
Oh, well, this is a surprise. Great, I will do it.
And if it all feels like the material, I mean, Teresa's done this portion before, so she can pinch it but I think this is going to be pretty intuitive for you.
Great, ready.
All right.
All right, so incidental runoff, unintended and infrequent volume of water leaving the area. So I think we all know what runoff is, that it's overspray onto a sidewalk. You can see from this example picture, which we see pretty frequently, you can tell when people have runoff from their lawn because it can stain the sidewalk, it's running into the street, that kind of thing. And runoff can be, anything that's basically leaving the site and causing, it's not beneficially applied and it's leaving the site. Next slide, please. So here's a great example of more runoff that is occurring. And this actually would be in violation of our water waste ordinance. So the city of Santa Rosa has adopted, since 1999 actually, adopted a water waste ordinance, basically prohibiting any water runoff from a site. So if it's just a couple of water drops on a sidewalk, we're not going to enforce that as a violation. But this kind of water where there's significant water, it's running off of the site, it's in the street or the gutter, that would be considered a violation of the water waste ordinance. And we do reach out to customers on a regular basis by sending them letters or making a phone call and letting them know that that kind of water waste is prohibited. Additionally, for recycled water, oh, Colin, did you want to? Okay. So additionally, for recycled water customers, this type of runoff is prohibited. So it can't happen. There is violations of certain drinking water standards, not drinking water standards. Colin, what's the violation?
It's a violation of the state's general order and
General
also
order.
the stormwater permit to allow recycled water to go to the curb and gutter and then into the storm drains to the creeks.
Thank you. So it can't happen basically for a recycled water site. Next slide, please. So here's again just another example of runoff or overspray that's occurring at a site. It's usually pretty easy to see. So again, one of the ways that this could be stopped is utilizing multiple start times, as I mentioned. So if you want to water, for 15 minutes, break that out into 3 5-minute cycles with an hour in between or something like that to allow the water to fully infiltrate. Could also be caused by high pressure. We see a lot of misting occurring when folks have high pressure in their overhead spray. So by reducing the pressure, you can often reduce the amount of overspray that's occurring. And we recommend multi-stream rotating nozzles. Those are specific kinds of overhead sprinklers that apply water in a stream as opposed to a mist and really allow the water to be, the water droplets to actually be heavier and fall down to the grass as opposed to misting away. And the city of Santa Rosa does have a rebate for retrofitting sprinkler heads from that misting pattern to these multi-stream rotating nozzles, which we recommend. Next slide, please. So excessive irrigation, here's a great example of a big problem, as you can see from this site. It looks like we've got a sprinkler head that's crooked. We've got water running off and it's running right into a storm drain. So this is like the perfect storm of what we don't want to see for any customer and especially for a recycled water customer. So the precipitation is coming too rapidly. It's faster than the soil can infiltrate. And as I said, water's running into the storm drain, broken sprinklers, or irrigation line. All right, next slide, please. So another example of poor irrigation with runoff occurring, and you can see the grass is even just overly saturated. There's some moss growing, it looks like, in between the grass blades. So that's a sure sign that there's over irrigation occurring. Next slide, please. So stormwater protection. So again, like Colin was just mentioning, we want to make sure that recycled water is not getting into our storm drain system. So our storm drains run directly from the street into creeks. They do not go into the sewer system. And so that water is not treated at all. Hence, we want to make sure that only rain is going down the storm drain and basically nothing else. So everything else should not be going down the storm drain. And that includes irrigation water, leaves, grass, mulch, pesticides, herbicides, oil and paint, etc., of course. So you can find out more information about this. The Streets to Creeks website is really great. They have a ton of information in there about how to prevent runoff from getting into the storm drain, and tips and tricks about that kind of thing. So the Streets to Creeks website is really great for more information about stormwater protection in general. Next slide, please. So yeah, one of the really important things to think about with stormwater is ensuring that if you have stockpiles of landscaping material like mulch or soil, that it's not dumped into the street. It needs to go on a tarp on the driveway, or at least on the site itself. It can't go in the street, and it can't go, certainly, hopefully not anywhere close to a storm drain. So you want to inspect, check for nearby storm drains before the delivery of these kinds of materials. You want to put a tarp under the pile, as I mentioned. Cover the pile with a tarp if you are not going to be using it that day, for example, to protect the pile from rain and winds that may bring that material out into the street and into the storm drain. You want to keep the material 2 feet at least away from the gutter and away from the curb, and then thoroughly sweep that area after the removal of the stockpile, again, to just ensure that that material isn't getting moved with rain into the storm drain. And like I said, the Streets to Creeks website is a really great resource to further explain all of this information. Next slide, please. So like we were talking about with irrigation, it can be really helpful to only irrigate between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. to minimize wind and public contact. The recycled water, they're not allowed to have public contact with that water. And so if you are using recycled water on site, you want to make sure that you're minimizing that public contact. So we recommend irrigating at night. Obviously, when you are on site and doing a system check, it does not need to be between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. We don't expect people out there with their headlamps or flashlights or anything. Run it during the day if you're checking it out to confirm that the sprinklers are operating correctly. That's fine. Again, I think I've said this multiple times, use repeat start times to minimize the ponding of water, making sure that you're prohibiting any runoff. And then great, yeah, so we've got a website, our website here, applying the water based on weather. So the srcity.org/watersmartyard is where you can go for the watering recommendations. You can also use the URL that I've been talking about, which was the srcity.org/watering recommendations. They both go to the same place. So feel free to tap into those websites to figure out how much water you should be applying on a weekly basis, because that's how often we update it. All right, next slide. So some of the irrigation management strategies that we recommend is upgrading to low volume sprinklers. So those are those multi-stream rotating nozzles that we recommend. Those are great sprinklers if you have an overhead irrigation system that to use. Obviously, Overhead sprinklers are only applicable for turf, and otherwise drip irrigation should be used. Point source irrigation is the best type of irrigation system to save water, and actually makes plants happier because they're not getting their leaves constantly wet. A lot of plants don't like that. So we recommend using drip irrigation whenever you can. We also recommend removing turf from problem areas. I don't hate turf. I'm not against it in general, but it has its time and its place. You know, it's perfect for people to play on. It's perfect for, you know, dogs to hang out on. If you're using it, great, keep it. But if there are areas where the only time the turf is walked on is when you mow it, then it usually means that it's not being utilized in a way that it should be. And you can save a lot of water by removing that turf. That also applies for turf that's like really weird shapes, or you know, in a high traffic area where the sprinkler heads keep getting knocked over. Those kind of problem areas, you're probably not ever going to have this nice pristine green lawn area. And so just suggesting to people that they remove the turf from those areas and convert those to low water use landscaping. And then I actually should mention also that the governor of California currently has a ban on non-functional turf, irrigating non-functional turfs. So basically, any turf that is not used for, you know, for playing on, for utilizing for like civic activities, is not allowed to be watered if it's in a commercial, industrial, institutional setting. So single family residential turf can still be watered, no problem, but those commercial, industrial, institutional turf applications of non-functional turf are no longer allowed to be watered. And we have more information about that on our website. We also sent out letters to all of our commercial customers last year about this, so everybody should be aware of it. But I'll also pop the URL into the chat for people to find more information about that.
And just to add to that too, if somebody is using non-potable water, does that restriction apply, Claire?
That's great. Thanks for clarifying that. No, so recycled water customers are exempt. So it's just for potable water. Okay, so next slide, please. So questions, I saw one in the chat come up. So is there a wind restriction when irrigating? So the city of Santa Rosa doesn't have any restrictions on when you should be irrigating or irrigation methods. So we don't have any restrictions. There are certain irrigation controllers that allow that sense the wind through a weather station, and then will shut off the irrigation from occurring that day because of wind. So you can actually buy controllers that will do that automatically for you as a homeowner, or if you have a commercial landscape. So hopefully that answers that question. If I didn't answer that in the way that you were thinking I would, then please feel free to clarify additionally in the Q&A. All right, so let's move on. Next slide, please. So quiz time. What is the goal of irrigation efficiency? Is it A, to apply the right amount of water at the right time? B, reduce runoff and deepen water penetration into soil? C, both of those? Or D, none? So if you can type your answer. Great, seeing a lot of C's. C, C, C. Yep. Great. Okay. Yeah, literally everybody hit C. And that is correct. Yes, exactly. The goal of irrigation efficiency is to actually get water to the plants when they need it without having it run off. Next slide. What is runoff? Is it A, irrigation water that flows off a site? B, rainwater flowing off a site? C, water that leaves a property due to broken or misdirected sprinklers? Or D, all of the above? Right, seeing some D's and C's. A. Okay, D. Most people are hitting D. Okay, you can reveal the answer, which is D. So runoff is, we usually say runoff is irrigation water that's flowing off of a site for whatever reason, but it can also be used to describe rainwater that's flowing off of a property. It's basically any water that is leaving your property, whether it's irrigation or rainwater. I think that's a little bit of a tricky question though. So maybe we should change that one just so that people are all on the same page, because that is a little bit tricky. Anyways, next slide, please. All right, so let me go back to the Q&A and just make sure there are no more questions. Yep, I don't see any.
Okay,
So
terrific.
I'll pass it off to you, Colin.
Thank you so much. So what we'll do now is we'll invite Andrew to go ahead and wait, is he on? Do I see?
Colin, he had to step off for.
Oh, he did. Okay.
items. So if you want to address.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be happy to. So the subregional system, that's the system that provides our recycled water to our agricultural customers. We just want you to be aware that there are folks out at the treatment plant who help to oversee that system and can help answer questions and help our agricultural customers use that water wisely and efficiently, as well as according to all of the rules and regulations. There are some maintenance requirements, and obviously the agricultural irrigation season has that same kind of curve that we saw Claire talk about because of ET, because of weather conditions. You know, the hottest, longest, driest, windiest days occur when we don't have rain in the summertime. So we know that there's a kind of irrigation season curve that is in effect for them as well. So what I would say is that you should have signs up as well, and if you need signs or you need assistance or you have questions about your use of City of Santa Rosa's recycled water at your agricultural site, please reach out to us. You could reach out. We'll have, near the end of this slideshow, we'll have some contact information. I also want to mention we're going to send out this slideshow as a PDF file because it's a very large file otherwise. So we'll send it out to you. So you will have these slides when all is said and done. When you get your certificate, you'll also get these slides. So you'll have contact information for folks that you may want to reach out to. But all the water features have to be clearly labeled if they're using recycled water. Most of the recycled water in Santa Rosa's agricultural users are on pasture and hay crops. Typically, they're irrigating from May to September. We do see some used for frost protection for vineyards in March and April. And then we also, of course, have row cropping, vegetable crops, and then vineyards irrigating their, not just for frost protection, but also for their grapes that they're growing. And the maintenance requirements are the same for any irrigation system. So one of the things that's really important is to not overwater, because again, those nutrients, it's really important to not over irrigate because of the nutrients and salts in the water, but also because we have a limited supply. All of that water is beneficially used by our customers, except when we have extraordinarily wet years like this year. And so we want to make sure that there's water for all of our customers. So
I just wanted to add one more thing for just a reminder for
sure.
the agricultural customers. You are required to complete the annual self-inspection report. So those go out once a year and they should be returned to the City of Santa Rosa. The other thing too, very important to keep us updated on any changes in your site supervisors or contact staff. So like Colin mentioned, we do have a slide later on with the contact information, so you can take that information down and we'll follow up with an email. We'll provide you with some of the links and contact information that we discussed during our training today.
Terrific. Thanks, Teresa. And it looks like we got a question that came in. what do you do with recycled water when you can't irrigate? So I think what you're asking is, what does the city do with its recycled water? Because the irrigation season clearly isn't every month. So we do send water to the geysers. So you might recall I talked a little earlier about them having steam fields that are deep underground where there's still hot lava. And so they inject that water to replace the water that's being released naturally through steam. They inject the recycled water. So we send water to them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So they are our largest user, and they allow us to avoid having to release that water to the Laguna de Santa Rosa, except again in very, very wet years like this year that we're experiencing. So it's always used. Do you produce electricity with the steam? We don't, but Calpine does. So Calpine uses that water. We send it to them. They then use the electricity they generate to pump it up 3,000 feet over the hill, and then they pump it down into the hot lava beds 3,000 feet below ground. And so they generate that clean electricity. And the biggest purveyor or seller of that electricity is Sonoma Clean Power. So if you purchase your power from Sonoma Clean Power, particularly if you're on their evergreen model of electricity, then you're getting water from, or excuse me, you're getting electricity from them. All right. I don't see other questions at this time. What we'd like to do is take another 5-minute stretch break. Go ahead and use the restroom, get up, walk around, and then when we return at about 6 minutes after 10 or so, actually let's do it 10:10. Come back at 10:10, and we'll have Tony talk to us about some of the key important areas that his team oversees in terms of protecting the water quality of our drinking water system and some of the rules and regulations that apply to recycled water. So we'll be back to see you at 10 after 10. Thanks, everybody. All right, we're going to get started in just about a minute. So if folks are getting ready, come back to your computers and back to your chairs, wherever you might be. We're going to get rolling in just about 1 minute here to learn more about recycled water distribution system and the requirements related to that. So just be a minute. All right, Tony, I'm going to hand it over to you. And as with Claire, if you could just let me know when you need slides advanced, I'll be happy to do that. So Tony Yamas is our water quality supervisor, and he's going to talk to us about recycled water distribution system requirements. Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Next slide, please. Okay, we'll set the stage for what the big deal is about cross connections and keeping your recycled water system separate from your drinking water system. Next slide. Okay, so we'll start with basic standards when it comes to installing reclamation lines, and then we'll go into labeling as well. So if you look on the picture, just horizontal separation, you want about 4 foot minimum separation. And then our vertical separation, you want about a foot or minimum of a foot, with the potable water being above the reclaimed water line. Next slide. So for the on-site criteria requirements, we'll go into pipe identification, labels, tags, and signs, and then we'll go through hose bibs as well. Next slide. Okay, so all new piping, whether it's a new or retrofitted system, must be installed according to the approved plans and then marked per these requirements. So they have to be clearly distinguished between recycled and potable water systems. As you know, all new reclamation lines today must be purple in color and then have recycled water, do not drink printed on both sides of the pipe. Next slide. So here's just a few examples from the boxes and labels. On the left, I'll start from left to right. On the left, you have a newer valve box, which is purple in color, and then you have your quick disconnect with labeled and tagged. The middle picture shows if you had an irrigation system that wasn't using reclaimed water at the time, and then you transfer it over to a reclaimed system, you would have to put a purple label on it to distinguish that. And then the box on the right, of course, is your newer irrigation box, which is purple in color. And there's also tags in there as well for the system, for the valves. Next slide, please. Actually, the question just came up. I don't know if Teresa, if you want to answer that, the difference between recycle. I'm talking reclaimed water, excuse me. This is reclaimed water from our system.
We kind of go back and forth. Reclaimed water is recycled water. So we call our recycled water system the reclamation system, but the water moving through it is the recycled water we've been talking about this morning. So you'll hear us sometimes go back and forth between talking about reclaimed and recycled. But when we say that, we're referring to that recycled water that's gone through all 4 processes of being treated. Thank you. Thank you, Colin. Okay, and then we'll talk about hose bibs as well. So hose bibs are not allowed or not allowed on the system when they're accessible by the general public. So those need to be replaced with quick couplers. I'm sure if it's gated or in an enclosed area that's fenced off or only available to that actual employees there or the personnel there, they could probably be on hose bib, but other than that, they'd have to be labeled or secured where the public doesn't have access to them. Next slide. And then advisory signage would typically be placed at entrances to the site, around eating areas so people are aware, adjacent to water features, would have to be in Spanish and English, and then with the minimum size of a 4-inch by 8-inch. Next slide.
Okay, and as far as once you've submitted your plan and you have it up and running, if you had to, or if you plan on making any major modifications to the already approved plan, you must submit plans and then receive authorization before you make those modifications. So everything would have to be approved prior to you doing that. Next slide. Oh. And I'm open for questions.
So let me check the Q&A real quick here.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything right now.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Yeah, don't see it.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go on to the quiz. Next slide. Okay, which color is used to designate recycled water pipes, equipment, and appurtenances? A is red, B blue, C yellow, D purple. Okay. Looks like this is a no-brainer. Good job, everybody. Answer? Yep. D. Perfect. Great job. Next question. Hose bibs are allowed on any recycled water system. True or false? Looks like pretty easy question as well. Answer is false. Okay, we'll go into cross-connection control and backflow requirements. Next slide, please. Okay, just a basic definition of what a cross connection is basically any physical connection between a water system supplying drinking water and any source or system containing water that is not or cannot be approved for human consumption, which is, and they usually call it an auxiliary water supply, could be a well, or it could be, of course, the recycled water system. Next slide, please. Other cross-connection examples include, like if you're looking at the pictures, the three pictures on the right, it could be a hose in a swimming pool, a hose in a recycled tank, a hose connected to a downspout. Basically, these are cross-connections where it can be cause backflow into the system. And if you look at the picture on the left, it's a perfect example of a hydrant being knocked down, depressurize the system, and it would cause reverse flow or a vacuum from either, it could be a residence where they had the hose in there, and basically that water would be sucked into our system, and then until we could isolate it. Well, that would be too late because everything would be stuck in the water main at that time and then distributed to people receiving that drinking water. Next slide, please. So how do you prevent cross connections? Well, you make sure there are no connections between a recycled system and any other water system. You prevent piping between potable and recycled systems. And then you do not use the same equipment on recycled systems and potable systems. So if you have a recycled system where you're using a hose and a hose nozzle, it's a perfect example. You don't want to unscrew that hose and go use it on your drinking water system, because that obviously is contaminated. So you don't want to use the equipment on the same, on both systems. Next slide, please. Now we'll cover a little bit of backflow prevention. Backflow devices ensure water quality by preventing the contamination of the drinking water supply. There's a couple different types of backflow devices. There's an above ground reduced pressure backflow principle, which is what you see in the picture. And then there's other below ground double check valve assemblies. We have a question that came up. Are there purple hoses available? Teresa, do you know if there's purple hoses out there available?
The only time we've seen purple hoses are Parks Department. Is this a Parks question?
Yeah, y'all are.
Anyway, the
Yes,
only time
yes,
we've
it
seen
is.
purple hoses are at the Parks Department. They usually do use those for events such as pulling water for weighting down tents. So they can use those hoses, but they have to be labeled and they cannot be used on a potable system. Usually when we have those type of events, the customer is required to get a permit from us, and in that permit, if there's any equipment that they may need to fill barrels for like weighting down tents, then the Parks Department will provide them with hose, quick couplers and hoses, and it's all tagged and labeled. Again, those devices are designated for the recycled water system, and they cannot be used on a potable system.
Okay, great question. Thank you, Teresa. Okay, and then what is backflow prevention? Well, backflow prevention is a stoppage of unwanted reverse flow of a water of a potentially contaminated or polluted source in the water supply. They're used to protect water supplies from contamination or pollution. And there's different types of backflow prevention, and then they must be tested annually. So that's one of the things about having a backflow is you have to have it tested annually. Next slide, please. Most of the systems are required to have backflow protection, especially potable systems that have dual plumbed facilities. And backflow prevention protects the potable water system from minor, moderate, and severe hazards. I mean, if you're injecting fertilizer on your system, of course, that's a severe hazard. Booster pumps are moderate, but if they are connected to the reclamation system, they do pose a higher hazard. Next slide, please. So we're going to go about just when you're ready to go to connect the recycled system, just here's all the basic steps for that process. Submit plans for review and regulatory agencies. Then we'll do a shutdown test. Make sure everything is labeled within the area. Create the separation between the potable system and the irrigation system. Remove the potable meter, and then we'll install a new recycled meter. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a brief animation of how that would be done in an actual, when we go out there to do that. Go ahead and click, Colin. So after submitting your plans, we'll do a shutdown test. So we'll charge the irrigation line, and then we'll make sure there's no water inside the building or anything else that we want to separate that system with. So again, we'll go in the building, we'll, open the faucets, flush toilets, make sure there's no water. Then we'll do the same on the domestic line. We'll charge that system and make sure there's no water coming out of the irrigation sites, sprinklers, valves. So we want to make sure those are completely separate while we do these tests. Go ahead, click, next click. Make sure that all the signage is installed everywhere where there is going to be reclaimed water. Go ahead, next slide. We separate the potable system from the irrigation system. Next slide. And then we make that connection from the recycled water line to your reclamation site. Next slide. And I believe, and then that still shows the final where it's connected to the recycled system. Next slide. And these are just basic code regulation that these fall under. We have Title 22, which falls under, the recycled water irrigated falls under the Title 22, and then the backflow and drinking water falls under your Title 17. And these are all state regulations. Next slide. So how do you continue to prevent cross connections? Well, you routinely have someone or the site supervisor would routinely inspect your site, make sure there's no physical connection between the two systems. And you want to make sure you know who's working on your site. If you hire a contractor to do some extra work, add some lines, you need to make sure that you inform them that their system is used by recycled water. Check your irrigation systems by looking at your meter and evaluate the pressures. And then carefully manage your dual plumb facilities. We do a cross connection test is required. Actually, the cross connection test is required every 4 years. Next slide. So the notification process of an actual cross connection. So the site supervisor must immediately notify the city of Santa Rosa of any failure or cross connection between the recycled water system and the potable water system, whether or not he or she believes a violation has occurred. So you want to notify the city and your supervisor as soon as possible. What was the nature of the cross connection, the date and time that you discovered that, your contact info, and then follow the cross connection emergency plan. The next slide. So you want to make sure you follow your emergency response plan. Notify the city immediately, shut down the recycled water system, but you want to keep the potable water system pressurized because you want to keep a positive pressure on that side just in case there is some kind of cross connection. We don't want to allow that vacuum or that suction into the system. Make sure that you post do not drink signs throughout the area. You're going to have to provide bottled water if necessary to, until the potable system is deemed safe to drink. And then follow procedures outlined by the Health and County Code, state, and the city of Santa Rosa. Next slide. I believe that's the last slide. So we're available for questions. You can email us at waterquality@srcity.org or call the number on the screen there. Well, I think with that, there's any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions from the group right now. You want me to go ahead and go to the quiz?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. What is a cross connection? A physical connection between any part of a drinking water system and any source of a system containing water or substance that is not approved for human consumption. Direct piping between the two systems, regardless of presence of valves, backflow prevention devices, or other appendices. C, a potable garden hose in a recycled tank, or all of the above. Let's see, I got a couple of A's. Mostly D's. I think I got a majority of D's. Is that the answer? Correct. Good. Next question. Backflow is water in a pipe that is forced to flow in reverse due to the back pressure or back siphonage, potentially introducing a health hazard. I see all truths. Looks like you got it. Yep, great job. What is the best way to prevent a cross connection? A, maintain appropriate signage, perform regular inspections, train all personnel working on the recycled water system, have a certified City of Santa Rosa backflow tester perform a yearly backflow test on the RP backflow assembly at the potable water meter, or E, all of the above. Looks like I'm seeing all E's. Perfect.
Terrific. Well, thank you again, Tony. Really appreciate your help with that. I don't think we had any questions come through during the quiz as well. So I think what we can do then is, at this point, we can then have Teresa talk to us about the site supervisor requirements. So site supervisors are the folks who are using our recycled water or another purveyor's recycled water on their site, for example, for landscaping or for growing crops and that sort of thing. So why don't I, at this point, Teresa, are you ready? Should I hand it over to you?
Yep, let's go.
All right.
So now that you have a better understanding of our recycled water system, including water quality, irrigation efficiency, system requirements, and cross connection and backflow protection, in this next section, I will talk more about the responsibilities of both the City of Santa Rosa as a provider and the user and the site supervisor. So if you can move on to the next question. Again, understanding the responsibilities of each of the parties will help you identify who to contact in case of an emergency and how to properly operate maintain a recycled water system that is efficient and compliance. So the City of Santa Rosa is the designated recycled water agency, and we are responsible for operating and maintaining the recycled water system up to the recycled water meter. We also work with you to ensure that we're complying with all the laws and regulations that are related to recycled water use. And to do that, we'll be inspecting, we inspect the recycled water system as necessary to comply with all the rules and regulations. Next slide, please. We also have designated staff for our recycled water system, and we do have 24-hour contact numbers. These are the contact numbers up here for our Santa Rosa urban system. We have a daytime phone number and an after hours number. Also for the City of Rohnert Park, Mark Henderson is the contact. I believe he's on today. On this webinar as well. So that is the phone numbers that we have for the Rohnert Park customers. And then for regional customers, we have a daytime and also an after hours number. So we want to make sure that you can connect with us at any time. If you have an emergency, even if it's after hours, we do have staff that can assist you and provide you with direction, especially if we have some sort of emergency or cross connection that may happen after hours. We want to make sure we're here to assist you and you can connect with us. So we do have connection or contact staff at all times. So next slide, please. And the recycled water sites also do have to abide by some requirements. All of our sites during their retrofit were required to obtain a use permit. Customers also are required to have permits from the recycled water provider. Those permits call out our rules and regulations. We talk about our the recycled water requirements for the systems, and the site requirements. All of our sites are required to have designated site supervisors, and those site supervisors must attend a certification training, which you are all attending now. We also do have the on-demand training that anyone that was not able to attend our live training can also attend. We'll provide all of you with a link at the end of our training so that if you have staff members or know of anyone that wasn't able to attend, they can comply with those requirements. Sites are also required to notify the city of any change in personnel or site supervisors, or if you've hired a new landscaper that's working on your site that needs to go through the certification. We want to know who they are. We want to make sure we have connection with them and we can contact them should an emergency arise, or if we identify runoff issues or breaks in the system that require immediate attention. We want to be able to connect with the right person working on your system. And again, any new site supervisor must attend the training, and the city must be notified who they are. Next, please. So in terms of the site supervisors, I will go over those responsibilities. Again, all of our sites are required to have a designated site supervisor. So if you're here today, you're either the designated site supervisor or you're a representative for a site. These are really important responsibilities that you need to understand. So you are responsible for the on-site recycled water system. That means anything after the meter, it's your responsibility to maintain. And as you saw earlier on during Tony's presentation, during the retrofit, the city went in and retrofitted everything up to the meter. And so all of that is purple. All of the on-site plumbing and pipes and all of that is not purple. So you need to know as a site supervisor that if you're maintaining that system, you need to know that anytime you dig up new pipe, that you need to replace that with purple piping, and that you're following our rules and regulation. So you are responsible for overseeing the operation and the maintenance of the recycled water system and correcting any system deficiencies, whether it's discovered through your inspections of the site or when we're out doing inspections and we discover a break in your system or any deficiencies, we'll follow up and make sure that we work with you to identify the issue and make those corrections. You are also responsible as a site supervisor of overseeing your site and preventing runoff, overspray, and any offsite drift. So making sure that you're conducting the regular maintenance that is required for your system, and you're inspecting your system regularly so that you're making those corrections. Of course, we're out there on a weekly basis, and if we discover those, we'll make sure to contact you and work with you to get them corrected. You also want to make sure you're keeping record of all the maintenance and the work that you're doing on site. It's really important to keep those records because at the end of the year, we send out an annual self-inspection report. That self-inspection report will ask you questions that are related to maintenance. And so having a good record keeping system will help you with your annual self-inspection report. And then, of course, being knowledgeable and understanding the recycle water rules and regulations, Title 17 and 22 that were mentioned earlier by Tony Yamas. Really important to know that you need to make sure you have your tags and labels in place. The city does provide a limited amount of replacement tags and labels. So if you notice any tags and labels that need to be replaced on your system, contact us and we'll make sure to get some of those to you. Next slide, please. Again, preventing cross connections, so making sure you're surveying your site on an annual basis and looking for any sort of potential cross connections, and making sure that your backflow device is being tested annually. Also, if you are a site supervisor and completed the training, if you have personnel that comes on board and has not gone through the certification, we want to make sure that you train your staff on understanding that they are working with the recycled water system, so that if they do go on site and they're making any repairs, they understand what those rules and regulations are in terms of the maintenance portion and making those repairs, making sure that everything's tagged and labeled, and that they don't create any cross connections between the two different systems that may be in site. So in this case, it would be your potable water system and your recycled water system for the irrigation. And all sites should have records of irrigation schedules, controller location, and as-built drawings. So make sure your staff is aware of where those drawings are, where your controllers are, and that it's tagged and labeled as well. And just being familiar with the on-site system, knowing where your meter location is, your backflow devices, your controller location, and the PRV assembly. For us in Santa Rosa, that's really important to know that if we, when we're out doing inspections, if we have to turn off the system, I typically will turn it off at the PRV assembly. It's just much easier for me to work with. So making sure that your staff is familiar with that assembly is important, because will provide you notification that the system's on, and when the repairs are completed, the system can be turned back on at the PRV assembly. Next, please. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but it's really important that all your tags and labels are in place, and that all sites have user agreement and permit requirements, and that they understand what those permit requirements are. And then just keeping us informed of any changes in any owner information, site supervisor, staff, or any contact information. And as Tony Llamas also mentioned earlier, if you're planning on having any modifications done to your landscape, you do need to provide the city with those modifications. We want to make sure we know that your system's being upgraded or it's changing, and we want to make sure we have a record of that. If you discover any failures or emergencies that are related to recycled water or a potable system, you want to keep us informed of those. So it's really critical to have that relationship with our site supervisors, making sure that we're always in communication, and that we provide the information you need to get your work done, but also that you are helping us meet all of the requirements that are needed to comply with local, state regulations that we need to comply with. So next slide, please.
Yeah, just before we do, Teresa, we got a question, and the question was, are there any rules or regulations on personal protective equipment for staff who work on recycled water systems?
So we'll cover some of the do's and don'ts in our coming up section that also apply to us. So making sure that you're using if you're handling recycled water, that you wash your hands. If you're going to eat it and you've handled recycled water, that you wash your hands. I mean, there are some just basic things that we need to also comply with, and we'll talk more about those in the upcoming slides. But
yeah, and I'll just mention that it's, along those lines, that it's very, very safe. So for example, children could play in sprinklers of recycled water and not be harmed by it in any way. So we do have precautions, as Teresa said, but all of the studies show that contact with recycled water in and of itself is not dangerous. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a slide or two.
Next slide. So yeah, thank you, Colin. So next slide, please. Again, I mentioned this annual self-inspection report earlier. When you receive the email, we're sending out an email now notifying you that the annual self-inspection report is due. You could also find that up on our website. You can download the form, fill it out, and you could either download it, fill it out, and return it to us via mail, or you can use our online form, fill it up online, and then we download it and keep a record of that. So for our Santa Rosa customers, those forms are being returned to myself. Roanoke Park customers, they go to Mark Henderson, and then our regional customers return that to Andrew Romero. So when you do get those reports and that email, be sure to fill them out and return them. And then we'll start to follow up if we don't receive those reports. So next slide, please. And then we highly recommend to our landscapers that if you can get access to view your monthly water bill, this is a really good way to determine if you're being efficient when you're applying water on the sites. So if you could ask your customer to provide you with access for that, that would be great. But in this example, we'll show you how you can determine that. Next, Colin. So for this site here, we do have our customers get a water budget assigned for their landscape, and it's based on landscape measurements. So we measure the landscape and determine the amount of high water use plants and the square footage of low water use plants, and then you get a budget. And in this particular case, the water monthly budget is 57,000 gallons. Next. Oh. And the current usage is 18,000 gallons there. So what this means is that they're being efficient in applying their irrigation. So if they were applying more than the 57,000 gallons, and they're being inefficient. So if you could get permission from your customer to view the water, your water bill for the site that you're working on, this would be a great way to determine if you're being efficient. Next, please. So again, making sure that you're continually maintaining your site and you're monitoring for any unauthorized discharges. If you do discover any discharges, you want to turn off the recycle water system, and you contact us right away. And then be prepared to make any of those repairs, and as well as implementing any additional requirements from the city. So when you're working with recycled water, I mean, these are some basic do's and don'ts that we're going to cover today. They're just common sense, you know, a lot of common sense do's and don'ts. But again, recycled water, even though it's very highly treated, it's very safe for full body contact. And in many cases, our recycled water, in fact, our recycled water here in Santa Rosa sometimes meets and exceeds the potable drinking water requirements. Recycled water from the city is not approved for drinking, so don't drink recycled water. Don't wash your hands with recycled water, and of course, don't remove any of the advisory signs or markings. You do want to prevent cross connections and be prepared to make repairs on any broken equipment, broken pipes, irrigation heads, those kinds of things. And then do minimize overspray, runoff, and ponding. Next, please. That looks like that's it for me. And is there any questions?
Don't see any new ones popping up, Teresa.
Christian, did we answer your question?
So I don't think it's, so you don't need to wear any special personal protective equipment when you're working with recycled water. But as Teresa said, you know, wash your hands, use common sense, but it doesn't pose a danger just because it's recycled water, because of the 4 treatment processes that it goes through. So, and it looks like Christensen says, yes, that answered the question. So great. So you want me to go to the quiz then, Teresa?
Is there any other questions? If we don't have any other questions, we can move on to the quiz.
David Valencia asks, when does an incident need to be reported?
So we asked our customers to report any sort of incidents that cause runoff. So if you have a break in your system, misdirected sprinkler heads, you know, if you have a broken pipe, you need to report it and keep record of that. And the reason we ask our customers to let us know of those incidents too is, well, one, we have to make sure that we're following up to in regards to any reporting, and that we're following all of our rules and regulations. But also we'll have customers call us and say, hey, I just saw you know, water running off on that site. And if we already know from you as a landscaper that you're taking care of it, then we know how to respond to our customers. So that's really important too, is that we want to make sure we're providing our customers with the information they need, and that we're working with you to make sure we address any other issues that may come up or corrections that may be needed.
And Teresa, I'll just say it's really helpful for us, as you said, if they can let us know, you know, if they're having significant runoff and that sort of thing. If it's really significant, please don't waste any time. Let us know. If water is literally flowing to the storm drain, we are required by the state to let the state know immediately. We are not going to fine you. You're not going to get punished. But we have to let the state know, and there are certain measurements that we take in terms of determining whether it's considered the city being in violation or not of our general order and that sort of thing. So it's the sooner you let us know, the quicker we can get out there and assess it and decide what next steps we need to take as a city. Again, you will not be punished. You're not going to be fined. You're not going to be, there's no ticket or anything like that, provided you let us know right away and you're doing everything in your power to fix the problem. We will definitely work with you. So when it's a significant problem, a major break, a major amount of water flowing, please don't waste any time. If it's after hours, you can call our after hours number. If it's during regular business hours, you can call our regular number. But yeah, please don't hesitate to let us know just as quickly as you possibly can. Looks like there's another question. Melissa asks, what are the consequences if someone does drink recycled water or if they wash their hands with it? And she's asking in terms of health, Teresa. Are there health consequences to drinking recycled water? Would they need to perhaps call poison control or go to the hospital or anything like that? Is there any significant danger they need to be worried about?
Well, we've looked at studies, and again, we haven't seen any cases in our area where that's been true, but certainly you could call poison control, and I haven't seen any, we haven't encountered any of those issues in our area. Again, our recycled water is very high quality. And in fact, in California, we haven't seen any issues with someone having drink recycled water. I mean, our water is tertiary treated recycled water. It's very highly treated. Again, it's not for drinking. You shouldn't be drinking it. Should that come up, I would encourage you to call poison control.
They could, although I would say, Teresa, the thing, if they feel really worried, they want to talk to their doctor or to poison control, certainly, they should take those steps if they feel that's important. But the poison control folks are going to want to know what's in the water. So it'll be important, we'll send you our slideshow so that you can report, well, it has some nutrients, it has some salts in it, so that they know, because none of those things are going to be particularly high levels, nor are they going to be particularly toxic to you as a human being. But poison control would most likely say to you, you're in no danger, just because there's nothing dangerous in the water. But certainly folks should take any steps they feel to feel comfortable and safe if they accidentally drank that water. And if you wash your hands in it and you realize later, just wash your hands again in potable water. Again, you're not in any imminent danger from this water. Again, it's got some nitrogen, some phosphorus, some boron, it's got a little bit of zinc and copper. It's got a few things in it, but again, these are very low levels, and they are not posing an immediate danger to you. So again, you don't have to wear personal protective equipment, just really common sense. You just, if you were using any non-potable water supply, just, wash your hands with fresh water as soon as you realize it. So I just wanted to kind of add that to the discussion. And it looks like there's somebody was saying they were imagining the transient population having access to the water. Yeah, we definitely, that's one of the reasons why, especially if you have a hose bib on a property where somebody could connect a regular hose to it, they don't need a special quick coupler connection. That's one of the reasons we require those, because then you have to have special equipment to connect to that hose bib. So we do not allow normal style hose bibs to be anywhere where the public could access it, just for that purpose, because the state does require us to prevent human consumption with that water. The state realizes the water poses very little danger as well, but in an abundance of caution, we have to make sure that it isn't consumed.
Yeah, that's right, Colin. So yeah, they wouldn't have access to the water.
There's an anonymous attendee who says, is there potential bacterial contamination with recycled water? We add chlorine to it, so it is chlorinated water. Could there be GI tract illness? Possibly mild if ingested. Again, potentially, but again, we add chlorine to our water, and Teresa tests at hose bibs throughout Santa Rosa through the area that has our recycled water. She tests that each week to see the residual chlorine is still up there. If it gets below where we feel comfortable, we try to keep it high enough that it won't burn grass, but you know, so that it's as high as we can go before it's going to cause damage to the landscaping. And so if it starts to drop below that, then she talks to the folks who manage that chlorine injection, and they can bump it up a little bit. We also flush our mains, and we encourage you to flush your sites as well, at least once a year, so that we don't have that that problem. See, the anonymous person is saying chlorine isn't 100% effective all the time. We've not seen any issues with it. We've tested our recycled water, and we've not seen bacteria in it, but certainly there could be a chance where that could be an occasion in whether it were another provider of recycled water and that sort of thing. But we do definitely want to make sure that we maintain chlorine in it the way we do in our drinking water, just to prevent those particular kinds of concerns. So yeah, terrific questions. Thank you so much for those. Really, really appreciate it.
Okay.
Teresa, do you want me to go to the quiz?
Yep, I think if we don't have any more questions, we can go ahead. So
All
which
right.
of the following are site supervisor responsibilities? A, being the contact for the site, informing the city of possible site modifications, and informing the city of any site supervisor changing, avoiding and detecting cross connections, minimizing ponding, overspray, and runoff of recycled water, training all personnel involved with the recycled water system, including third-party contractors, or E, all of the above. Starting to see a lot of E's. A lot of E's here. All right, let's see what the answer is. And E is correct. Which of this could indicate that a cross connection exists? A, B, C, or D, all of the above? Give you guys all a couple of minutes to read over those answers and make your choice. Starting to see. Let's see, what are we seeing here? We're seeing D's. Maybe looks like D. That is correct. Or I'm sorry, D is correct. So yeah, we didn't talk much about the taste, but or smell of the drinking water. But if you notice, you know, when you're getting drinking water, if you notice that it looks different, it smells different. I mean, besides the smell of the chlorine, or there's a change in the taste of the water, then that could indicate a cross connection. Next, please. Which of the following applies to recycled water piping? A, B, C, or D, all of the above? I'll give everybody a couple minutes to look over those and make a choice. Okay, let's take a look at what that answer is. So it's D, all of the above. So again, making sure that all the everything's labeled, including any pipes that you might expose during, say, a repair, things like that. All right. I just had one last thought. Christian was asking those really great questions about, drinking recycled water. If you were to accidentally ingest recycled water, you want to make sure you let us know also at the city, because maybe we need to, increase signage, or there's signage missing, or there's some labeling that may need to be added, or there may be other things that we can do to make sure that that doesn't happen. So you want to make sure, if that were to ever be the case, that you let us know, in addition to following some of the other health recommendations that Colin mentioned earlier. Certainly let us know so that we can take a look at, is there anything that we can improve on our end to make sure that doesn't happen?
That's a great point, Teresa. Thank you for bringing that up. Really appreciate it. And I too really appreciate all of the questions that we've had today. It's really helpful to us to see what concerns and questions you have, and to know that you're paying attention and you're engaged in the training. So thank you all for that. And thank you, Teresa. You did a terrific job. I'll talk about certification and evaluation. Teresa will probably chip in a little bit to make sure I'm not leaving anything out. But we will probably be able to wrap up in about 10 minutes or so. So we're going to let you go early today. So that's good news. So let me go ahead and talk about evaluation and certification. So everybody who registered, we have your information. And so we have your email, we have your name, and Teresa is going to generate a certificate for each and every one of you. And she does that, for everybody. But if you attended, but you didn't register, or you attended, you didn't register, and you didn't get your name typed into the Q&A, do definitely let Teresa know. The other thing is, if in 3 or 4 weeks from now you still have not gotten your certificate, you can reach out to Teresa as well. If you need contact hours for licensing or whatever the case may be, make sure you send an email to Teresa, because she needs to know that, because she can give you verification that shows that you did in fact attend and that you met the requirements for the contact hours. But you'll have to let her know that. She won't know which of you needs that. So if you do need it, do please make sure you reach out to Teresa, and then she can get that to you. Again, you're going to get this PowerPoint, so this contact information will be included. For our urban customers in the city of Santa Rosa, we've got a 24-hour daytime and nighttime phone numbers. You can always reach out to me during business hours if you want to ask me questions, or you need information, some kind of assistance. You can contact Teresa. Teresa is really the program manager. She's the one who's on day-to-day making sure we're staying in compliance. She's probably your best choice between the two of us to get assistance, to answer questions, to stay up to speed, to report new site supervisors, that sort of thing. So she's your primary go-to for sort of informational, non-emergency type stuff. And then for our ag customers, you can contact Andrew Romero. If it's non-emergency, certainly email and phone are great. If it's during the daytime and you need somebody to know right away that something is going on, I would use that daytime or after hours number, so that you can make sure to let them know that if there is some kind of issue that you need the city to pay attention to right away. For Roanoke Park, Mark Henderson is your contact, and he's got a daytime and an after hours number. So please, if you're in Roanoke Park and you're using recycled water, make sure you reach out to Mark. That's your quickest way to get assistance if you're a Roanoke Park urban site user, because if you call us, we're just going to refer you over to him. So make sure you do go ahead and contact him. In addition, we have some sub-regional contact staff. These are folks who are working in our recycled water system that's delivered to our agricultural customers. So we have an administrator who can help with billing, with usage and report information. That's Priscilla. Dennis helps with irrigation schedules, irrigation equipment questions. Steve is in charge of system pressure and water quality, meter and frost protection. And then Andrew oversees the whole program. So if you need help with a user agreement, some kind of regulatory issue, grazing or special reports, Andrew is your person to go to. And again, we will send out this PowerPoint, so you're going to get this information. So don't worry too much about trying to scramble and get it all written down right now. We're going to go ahead and get that out to you. Thank you all for coming. If there are any other questions, we would be delighted. We were able to move through this relatively quickly today, hopefully not too quickly, but we do have time. So if you'd like to ask any questions, we sure welcome those.
Before
Oh,
we
you're
want,
welcome. Thank you, Michael, for the thank you.
before you all drop off, if you could all just do me one last quick favor so that I can make sure I captured everyone who's here today. Can you all send a Q&A with your name, please? Just give me your full name. That'll help me double check that I've captured everybody who's here.
Thank you for that. And then there's a great question. If someone wasn't able to attend today, where would they find the on-demand training? That'll be on our webpage, and we will also include that when we send information out to you. We'll include a link to that page. If you were trying to find it on your own right now, if you were to use a search engine and type in City of Santa Rosa, recycled water, user's guide, you'll get a link that pops up, and that'll go to our user's guide page. And at the bottom of that, the course is there. They watch the video. Currently, it's the video that we used from last year. And then they take the quiz and they submit it, and then we get them certified. So it takes about as much time as you've taken today to spend with us. I think that recording is also right about 3 hours time. So they can do that any time of day or night. It does take us typically a week or two to get that certificate turned back around, depending on workload and vacations and that sort of thing. But we do try to get those out to you. If you do complete that course and you don't get a certificate in a week or two, do please send an email to Teresa and let her know. She'll go back through and make sure she's got what she needs and gets that certificate out to you. Let's see if I can see any other questions. I'm seeing everybody's names. Sure, appreciate that, everyone. Thank you so much for doing that. You're welcome for the information. Thank you for the thank you to each of those folks who've said that. Really appreciate it. I don't see any questions that we haven't addressed. Teresa, are you seeing any that we haven't addressed?
I don't.
Okay. Let me just take one last scroll through. Oh, why is the Portuguese the only one with an exclamation point? Because of clip art.
Yeah.
Or maybe the Portuguese are more enthusiastic. I don't know. Thanks, anonymous attendee. That's a great question. Oh, and English too. Yes, right. The English has an exclamation point too. I'm glad this was super helpful. Thank you for that. With all this rain, are we in a drought? No, we are no longer in drought. We lifted the drought declaration March, I'm going to forget the exact day, March 14th or 15th, City Council lifted that. We are no longer in drought. Lake Sonoma is full, and it has about three and a half years of water supply in it. So if we don't have a severely dry period, we don't anticipate going back into a water shortage condition. If we did have a really severe drought again in 2 or 3 years, we'll let everybody know that we need them to help conserve. We always appreciate folks using water wisely. We always appreciate folks avoiding wasting water. There's never an extra drop to waste, but otherwise folks can go back to sort of their normal way of life in terms of using water. We have a really robust water use efficiency program. Recycled water sites are eligible for those rebates. So if you have a site and you're trying to convince them to change out their turf for low water use plants, make sure you reach out to Claire Nordley's team, the water use efficiency team. If you're not sure how to get to Claire, there is the watersmart@srcity.org, I believe is the email address. But Teresa, let's make a note when we send out the PowerPoint, let's include a link to the water use efficiency webpage, because you're all eligible for those. And sometimes it's helpful when you're trying to work with a customer and to show them the business case to reduce water use. There's money savings there, rebates help. And so we can help you look at what is the return on investment and help a customer realize how quickly, upgrading their irrigation system or changing from turf to low water use landscape, how quickly that can actually pay off. So, and Claire said, I had the correct email, yay, watersmart@srcity.org. But we'll include the webpage when we send out that information to you. So no, we're no longer in drought. is the Laguna flooded along Occidental Road near High School Road with recycled water? No, the amount of recycled water is perhaps maybe 1% of the water. We're not allowed to put very much recycled water in at any given time. I believe it can't exceed more than 5% of the amount of water flowing. So, and we are doing our best not to discharge because that water is helpful to our customers throughout the year. So no, that flooding isn't from the recycled water. There may be recycled water in it, obviously, because it has been discharged, but it would be probably no more than about 1% of what you're seeing there, and probably less, because at any given moment, we can't exceed 5%, but we're trying to limit how many minutes we're actually discharging. So over a given period of a day or so, it's probably just a fraction of 1%. Does Santa Rosa take water from Lake Mendocino? No, we don't take water from Lake Mendocino. By the time that water, there are water rights associated with the water stored in Lake Mendocino. By the time it even gets to before even Dry Creek, but certainly by the time it gets to Healdsburg, there's technically, mathematically, all of that water that was released from Lake Mendocino has been used up by folks who have water rights. So we don't depend on it for our water supply. The folks up north, they really do. It's really a critical water source for them. But Santa Rosa's water supply is not technically part of that. And the dam there will be removed, correct? Well, that's under discussion. I think there's a lot going back and forth about which dams might be removed and why. I think it's the dam that's further upstream. That's the Scotts Dam that's most under scrutiny at this point, not the Lake Mendocino Dam. That one is not under scrutiny, but the dam on Eel River is under scrutiny because it prevents any endangered fish from being able to migrate further to some really pristine grounds for laying eggs. I'm sorry, I'm going blank on what that word is, but basically habitat for them to spawn. There's the word. So, but I don't have much more information than that, but Santa Rosa is not, what's the term I'm looking for? We don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. So it's not, but we're at the table talking about things with folks. We're interested in keeping up with all the things that are happening with that Part of Valley project and with Lake Mendocino and with the Eel River, but we are not a direct, what's the word I'm looking for, constituent, I guess, of that water. So, but we certainly are talking with folks about it who are looking at making decisions and making sure we're staying informed. Let me see if there are any other questions. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you again for the thank yous. I'm going to scroll through. Teresa, do you see any final questions? I think we may have gotten all of them. All right, let me just scroll down one last time. All right. Well, I think that's it. Thank you all so much. And if you do have questions, you know how to reach us. We're going to email you that PowerPoint, so you're going to have our contact information, and happy to answer any additional questions that you may have. Thank you all so much for your attention, for your participation, for managing the sites that you manage, for doing the work that you do. Really, really appreciate it. It looks like I got a couple participants raising their hands. So Jose, I'm going to allow you to talk. If you unmute yourself, you're welcome to speak, but you'll have to unmute yourself on your side. And Jose, you're not unmuted yet. That's Jose Vega. There you go. Go right ahead now.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a question. Sometimes in the fields, I have low pressure on the system, and I want to know how increase the water pressure.
Yeah. Good
Because
question.
sometimes,
So
you know, when you don't have no pressure on the valves or the irrigation, especially when rotor is, all the water go to the street.
yeah. Yeah. So Jose, is this a recycled water site that you're asking about?
Yes.
Okay. And it's located in the city of Santa Rosa?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Okay, great.
Point and West 9.
Okay, terrific. Will you please reach out to Teresa? Make sure you send her an email. She can follow up, talk to you by phone or email, or if you want to give her a call, let me actually, I think her phone number just make sure you have her phone number handy. So Teresa's phone number is here on the screen now. Give her a call or send her an email and she'll follow up. She'll talk to our operational folks and follow up
Well,
on that.
the other thing too, Jose, is that you do have the PRV assembly, and in the PRV assembly, there's 2 pressure valves. There's the city, you'll see the pressure from the city coming in, and then there's another valve that's on the property side. And you as a landscaper can control the pressure on the property side. So if it's too low, you can increase the pressure on the property side, but give me a call and we can talk about it. But you do have the ability on the PRV assembly, if you know what that looks like, to control the pressure on the on-site system.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you. Wait, I will call you when be there.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much. It was a terrific question. Really appreciate that. And then I've got another hand raise and I'm going to allow you to talk. So if you had your hand raised, now's your opportunity to unmute yourself and go ahead.
I think that you already answered my question, so I apologize. I should have already put my hand down.
Oh, no problem. Oh, that's great. Okay, no problem. Happy to have answered it in advance. That's terrific. Then are there any other questions? All right, great. And again, if anybody else has issues with pressure, definitely reach out to Teresa and she can work with you on that. If it's an agricultural thing, then you're going to want to talk to Andrew Romero, and his number is on this screen as well. Andrew takes care of the ag customer pressure issues, or he'll assign one of his staff to work with you on that. In fact, let me just go to the next slide. Oh, Steve Jacobs would be for your ag customers. On city recycled water, Steve Jacobs will be your person to talk about system pressure. So if you're an ag customer and that's a struggle you're facing, please do reach out to Steve Jacobs. And again, if we don't get this presentation out to you quickly enough, you can definitely reach out to Teresa. You can go to our recycled water page. Our contact information is there, and she can route you to the right person. So if you're waiting for this presentation and all these contact names and numbers and it's not getting to you quick enough, just reach out to us anyway. We'll help you figure out who you need to talk to. It's going to take us a couple of days to wrap things up and then get some emails out and all that. So if something comes up in the meantime, just reach out. All right, again, thank you all so much. Can't tell you how much we really appreciate your time and attention, and we'll get those certificates out to you and we'll get that additional information out to you. And thanks again for all the work you're doing, using water wisely and helping us stay in compliance with our recycled water use. Can't tell you how much we appreciate it. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Colin, can we stay on for a couple of minutes just so that I can capture?
Yeah, and you know what? Somehow I think I stopped recording, Teresa. I don't know how I did that, but I think I accidentally stopped recording too soon. Oh, darn. Yep. I am so sorry. I somehow shut it off too soon. Teresa, I'm going to go ahead and actually it says there's 15 participants left on. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and close this and I'll give you a phone call. Oh, it did record. Okay, great.